Okay, I think it's slowly time to start. It's still some people are joining, but this is all great. Yeah. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming to this small workshop in order to explain a little bit how Dharmamitra can help in translation and research for yeah, Tibetan, Sanskrit, and related classical Asian languages. So yeah, I'm Sebastian. I'm on the team, yeah, since we started in 2023, and today Asada is also here to join us. Yeah. Maybe Sarah, you want to just say hi. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sarachaki Bertok, and I've joined the Dharmamitra's great team in this year, the beginning of this year, and I'm supporting Sebastian during this workshop.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So let me see my screen. That 1 second. Okay. Mm, One moment. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, so for today we have two major parts of the workshop. So in the first half, I will be giving an introduction into Dharmamitra and what the different functionalities are that we are currently providing. And for some of you on this call, you might have already been to that kind of presentation before because there's just so many people who come new to the platform, but then also people who have been using it for a while. So there's a certain chance that things we are explaining this time you might have already heard or seen before. But yeah, in the second part of the workshop, we will be looking at some interactive examples that some of you thankfully have submitted in advance, so we can take them as a starting point for, yeah, looking at Dharmamitra in an interactive way, see how it actually functions, and also the kind of problems and difficulties that we encounter. And I think it's also an important opportunity for us to get some, yeah, the opportunity to have a direct discussion with all of you who are using the platform or who want to use the platform. So in that sense, this workshop has two goals. On the one hand, we would like to introduce Dharmamitra and just to communicate what it can do, and also, yeah, to make it accessible for those of you who have not yet had an opportunity to familiarize yourself with it. But then we would also like to see this as an opportunity to learn from you what you would like to see on Dharmamitra, what kind of maybe additional data, additional functionality, but also the type of problems you encounter, the kind of difficulties that happen on Dharmamitra. This is a good opportunity for us really to learn how we can improve the platform and make it more useful to all of you who are using it. Yeah, so just to again give a brief overview of the schedule. So first, in the beginning, I will give a presentation that will be roughly 30 to 35 minutes, and then we have 10 minutes Q&A regarding the presentation, and after that we will take a 15-minute break. And after the break, which must then be, I think, the 6 p.m. CET or 12 Eastern Time, we will start with a collaborative session where we look at the submitted material and also interactively look at functions of Dharmamitra and how we can, yeah, use them and apply them to our material. Now coming to the introduction presentation, I have 6 parts to show. So first, an introduction into what Dharmamitra as a project actually is. Then our OCR function. So basically starting from the very first step, how we can turn text into machine readable text. Then the MITRA translate and grammatical analysis functionality. Then the MITRA explore system. A few words about Dharma Nexus and also about our MITRA browser extension. So this is actually not everything that Dharmamitra can do, but I think for a workshop of this size, this must be a good introduction into the main functionality. So coming first to the question, what is Dharmamitra? It has started as a research project originally at UC Berkeley in 2023 and is now supported by the Tsadra Foundation and the Tohoku University as well. So there are three institutions here involved. It is focusing on integrating advanced data-driven methods into the daily workflow of translators and researchers of textual material of the Buddhist tradition. So we cover Tibetan, Sanskrit, Pali, and Chinese literature in that regard. And currently we provide machine translation, grammatical analysis, advanced search systems, and OCR for Tibetan, Sanskrit, Pali, and Buddhist Chinese. And Dharmamitra also features the Dharma Nexus database, which functions as the textual reference engine of Dharmamitra, which has all the textual data stored and also intertextual links that make it possible to explore multilingual parallels across different corpora and also within the same corpora. It's hopefully not difficult to find the website, so you can go to the website dharmamitra.org. But also if you want to use a QR code, we have also the QR code here, but I think the website should be easy to find. Now coming to the OCR function, which is the first part of Dharmamitra. So what does OCR even mean? To start in a very basic sense, OCR is basically the process of turning an image of a picture, a book page, and so on into a machine-readable text. So if we want to use the text in a word processor or for machine translation or for any other task like searching and so on, OCR is usually the first step. And you can basically imagine this. We have a picture of our image, but we, of course, cannot yet search inside of this representation. So we need to do something with it in order to make it searchable. And this is where the OCR tool comes in. Dharmamitra currently has two different OCR engines that are functioning behind the system. So, and we have a system that will automatically determine which of the two models is being used. So when you open the OCR tool, you can choose between the MITRA BDSC model, which is currently under development together with the BDSC and which provides the most reliable quality for OCR of Tibetan material. There are some smaller problems with the tool, of course. We can discuss that later, but I think for the rendering of Tibetan block prints as well as Ume to some extent, this is currently the most reliable solution. And then we also have the MITRA Surya model, which is optimized for Indic scripts. So if you have Devanagari prints, for example, that represent Sanskrit text, this is a good model to do that, even though it's not without problems either. And we are constantly trying to improve the quality. You can upload up to 20 pages at the moment, up to 150 megabytes in size. And you also have the option to automatically convert the output into, if the input is Devanagari, into IIST, or if the input is Tibetan, then we can also render it into Wiley transliteration. And it's also directly integrated into our OCR, into our translation tool, so you can directly translate from images, for example. How does the interface look like? So we have this OCR selector here at the left side of dharmamitra.org. So if you click on that OCR selector, then this OCR window opens. And on the top left, you can choose the model. So currently it's set to auto, but you can also choose the BDSC model if you have Tibetan material, or the Surya model for Sanskrit or other Indic scripts. And then you basically can either drag and drop the file directly into the interface, or you can click the browse file button here and then navigate to your file. And after adding the file, you have to click the play button here in order to start the processing. And I think it's important to notice that our OCR system works best if the image is in landscape orientation. So if it's flipped 90 degrees, this might cause problems. And as mentioned before, you have the option here to toggle the conversion from Devanagari to IST or Tibetan Unicode to Wiley. That is possible. And on smaller text, we render the text directly into the window, but if it's a larger text, then we'll get a link to a file here that you can then automatically download. So this is yeah, this is the output format. Currently, the OCR system for Tibetan does not handle interlinear annotations, glosses, and so on, because this is a very complex annotation problem. You can imagine there can be like, yeah, all kinds of difficulties connected to that. So currently, our system will just drop those annotations and glosses. Moving on to the MITRA translation and the grammatical analysis part. So this is maybe the future that most of you know, or that Dharmamitra is most known for. So this is the neural machine translation system that has advanced functions for intertextual searching, grammatical, and contextual explanations. And in that sense, Dharmamitra offers three different modes. And all of these three different modes actually offer also slightly different translations. So this is due to the technological mechanisms involved. So the different modes have different emphasis in how the technology works behind that. And for that reason, you will also get a different output. And these main modes are the translation mode, the grammar mode, and the research mode. And in order to open the translation mode, you just click on the translation icon on the left-hand side of the menu. And if you want to translate from an image, you can use this upload button where you can select an image or drag and drop, and then you can yeah, translate from the image, or you can type in the text, paste in the text. And we mainly support Sanskrit, Pali, Tibetan, and classical Chinese, even though it will work if you input other languages as well. So for example, Japanese is also supported, but we are optimizing our system to work especially well on these languages. Yeah. We have a number of settings for the translation system that maybe not everybody is aware of. So there's a settings button, and after clicking on the settings button, you can choose between the three different translation modes. So the one of them is translation, grammar, and research. Then we also have the option to specify the input encoding. We have the auto detect mode, which most of the time works well, but if you are using some specific transliteration of Sanskrit, for example, then it might be a good idea to specify that. For example, Harvard Kyoto is can create some problems if you don't specify that. Yeah, then we have the output language, which is of course very important. You can set the target language that you want to translate into. The default setting here is English, and we provide other languages, even though the quality when translating into English is generally the best. So this is the most reliable setting. But we are actively collecting also data to translate into other languages. And recently we have added more data for Japanese and for Korean and also for modern Chinese. So we are trying to improve the quality for those languages. In the translation mode, you have a number of additional functions. So on the one hand, we have the feedback button. You can vote up or vote down a translation. And if you vote down, you also get the opportunity to leave some remarks about what is problematic with the phrase. So you can leave a comment about the problems, and then you can also yeah, optionally leave your name. And we are looking very actively at this feedback. So this is extremely helpful for us to know what kind of improvements we might need to make. If there are problems, like for example, the wrong output language, this sometimes happens that people set the target language to Japanese, but then the output is in Chinese, for example. That's a programming mistake. And this is a really good way for us to be alerted about that. And also, it's really helpful for us to see where we can improve the system. So please, this feedback system is really helpful for us if our users make use of that. Then we have the citation function, which we just added a couple of days ago. And this is something that came up again and again. And I think it's also in one of the submissions we got in advance of the workshop where somebody was asking about how to cite Dharmamitra. So we have added this now. If you click on the citation button, then you will get a permanent stable link that is stored in our database. And we also we'll make a copy of that on GitHub, so this will be a stable data for the future. And then you can use these references in the article that you are working on and so on. So this is now added. Then we also have the function to copy the translation or to save it into a text file. And also after the translation has rendered, we will give the option to switch to the other modes like grammar, research, and explore directly, so you don't have to navigate into the menu every time. Yeah. Now, moving on to the grammar mode. So this is enabling a more detailed breakdown of the sentence. So if you start with a Tibetan sentence, for example, it gives a word segmentation, and then it also provides links into Christian Steinert's Tibetan dictionary for all of the individual words. It needs to be said at this point that we do not yet have a dedicated high quality segmentation engine for Tibetan, and this shows sometimes that the segmentation of our system and the dictionary entries don't line up perfectly, for example, but we are working on this to provide a more coherent segmentation in the future. For Sanskrit, we actually have a dedicated segmentation and grammatical analysis engine. So if you click this button, we have a special button for the Sanskrit grammar analysis, which will not show anything if you are translating from Tibetan or from Chinese, but for Sanskrit it will. And this then uses the digital corpus of Sanskrit by Oliver Helwig as the main data storage in order to segment the words and to give grammatical tagging. So we have morphosyntactic tagging, we have the compound breakdown, and also the dictionary entries from Abte, Monnier-Williams, as well as the Petersburger dictionary, together with links to the actual PDF pages. So this is all available, and you can also switch this to Indic style, which then will use Indic labels for the grammar description, even though I think that still could be a bit more comprehensive than it is right now. Moving on from the grammatical explanation mode to the research mode. So again, this is by toggling the mode to research or by clicking the research button at the end of the translation. This will give a translation and then also a contextual analysis of the intertextual relationship of that passage. So it will use the Dharma Nexus database in order to automatically identify possible parallel passages, translations into other languages, and more. And it gives related text in different languages and also the ability to explore more results from the same language in the explore mode. And we also have the segment view, which is a new functionality we added a couple of weeks ago, which allows to learn more about the context of a specific result. And this is especially important for the metadata. So when opening the segment view, this will give the metadata here, which is very important to know where the e-text is actually sourced from. So we have recently added that for the Tibetan Kangyo and the Tengyo, and also for our Sanskrit e-text, which was a long time problem that we didn't have a good metadata catalog for our Sanskrit e-text. So this has now been added. And then we are also providing links into Dharma Nexus, our own database, and then Toda for Dirge Kangyo and Tengyo block prints that are here scanned at Tohoku University, and then also to RKTS, where you can then also access the block prints. So this will link directly on the folio level, so you will be directly at the position of the text. And then it provides a translation and the original text, of course, then a translation, and then also some parallel passages from Dharma Nexus if they are relevant to that segment. So that's also included. We have a number of known problems, of course, and I think we can use the workshop to discuss these in more details. But I think it's really important to stress at this point that the translations created by Dharmamitra are never perfect, and there are probably mistakes in each of them. I think to my experience, it has not happened yet that Dharmamitra produced something that was absolutely perfect, but this is just something to be aware of. So this is a system that has known weaknesses. As we mentioned before, the Tibetan grammatical annotations don't always align perfectly with dictionary entries, and a dedicated segmentation engine here would be really great, and hopefully that will come in the future. And then also, currently we are starting to add English translation references that give also some bibliographical information. So this has been absent from Dharmamitra before, and it is something that we really want to add, but it's not that easy because there's, of course, one needs to have agreements with the publishers and so on, and this is a slow process, but one by one we try to make this possible, that we can show the actual English translations that have already been created as a reference for our users. Now moving on to the MITRA Explore system. So this is basically the search and discovery side of Dharmamitra, and it addresses a long-standing friction point for translators and researchers in Buddhist studies. So when working on a passage in Tibetan, for example, we might need to find parallels in Sanskrit or from Pali and Chinese. Obviously, these challenges occur again and again in both research and in translation. And Explorer is basically designed to address this and to provide one interface where all of these queries can be made. And for that, in order to access the MITRA Explore function, we have the button over here. And by clicking on the Explore button, you can then enter the Explore interface, where we have a number of search methods combined. So Explore is basically multiple search engines in the same place. So we have what we call the traditional search system, which uses linguistically preprocessed keyword search. So for Sanskrit, obviously this requires a linguistic stack where we provide word segmentation and so on to facilitate the search. Then for Tibetan, also some like stemming and so on needs to be done. Then we provide monolingual semantic search. So this is the ability to search within the same language and to retrieve matching passages. And then we have also the ability to provide cross-lingual semantic search. So you can use a passage in Sanskrit, for example, to find a matching passage in Tibetan. You can also use our system to do conceptual and topical queries, like, for example, the explanation of the 5 strengths. You can take an English query and then search, for example, in Tibetan literature based on that English query. It does not always work 100% perfectly, and this needs to be said at this point. So especially the semantic functions are still, I think they can give a direction and they can give some inspiration about what kind of literature to explore. But of course, it's not to be expected that the system will always work out 100% perfectly. Our retrieval system uses links into Dharma Nexus and also provides the original text to be as reliable as possible. This does not mean that it's perfect. So it is possible that the representation of the Tibetan, for example, based on our database is not done 100% correctly if you see the overview. So we can always just encourage our users to look up the actual Tibetan in the Dharma Nexus database, and of course also go beyond that and look at the actual block prints. And this is why we are providing the links in our segment view, because already the e-text representations will have some problems. So there might be typos, there might be OCR mistakes and so on. And we use OCR as well for our data collection. So that is also to be aware of, that our data is not perfect. And then the retrieval system, the AI system that we use, might also introduce additional distortions. And this is just a limitation of the technology. And for that reason, we really want to encourage our users to check the sources manually before citing. I think that's very, very important. Always go back to the main source that is available to verify if the representation is correctly done. Explore has a number of settings, and I think these are really important in order to understand what can be done with the system. So on the one hand, we have the mode selector where you can decide whether you want to have the English summary or not, for example. Some of our users prefer to have the English summary. Some people do not like to have that. If you set it to the DB search mode, then it will only give you the database results and it will skip the English summary, which might be preferred for some users. Then we have, again, the input encoding settings. So here you can choose different input encodings. We do have the filter options, which is very important, where you can set the source language to, for example, Sanskrit, Tibetan, Pali or Chinese, and this becomes very important for multilingual queries. So if you have an input in Sanskrit and you want to find something in Tibetan, then you have to set the source language to Tibetan first, because this will then enable the multilingual search system. And after setting the source language, you can also narrow it down further to specific collections. So for example, if you have set the source language to Sanskrit, then you can also narrow down the search to, let's say, the Buddhist non-scriptures, the treatise section of the Buddhist Sanskrit literature. Or you can even go down further and limit the search to only Yogacara material and even down to individual authors. That is also possible. You can search within specific text. And in order to really have get the most out of the system, we encourage to explore the search function and to make use of that in your work. Then we also have the this is the basically when you have the results. So after you have set your settings and you click on the search, you will get the summary here in English, which then again provides a translation of the source and also the segment view here. So this is in ways very similar to the deep research mode, but it has a lot more filter options compared to the deep research mode. So the settings menu here is not available in deep research. And then again, you also have the possibility now to cite these responses. So if you want to refer to this, if you want to use it in some article or something like that, then you can use the cite button here, and then you will get the bibliography handles in order to do that. And here in the same way, like for deep research, we also provide the segment view, which will then include the metadata and further information about the specific result that you are looking at. When you set it to the database mode, then you will get the database results directly. So it will skip the English summary part. And here you have the ability to expand the context. You can copy the reference directly. So the specific reference, you can copy that here. And then we also have the explanation button, which is basically providing something very similar to the segment view. So if you click on that, it will give you the links into the different databases and also an overview of the metadata and so on. So that is the function here is very similar to the segment view. A few tips and tricks to be aware of with MITRA Explore. On the one hand, MITRA Explore is not a super smart search engine. So unlike, I don't know, if you go to ChatGPT, you can ask it, what does early Buddhism say about, I don't know, the killing of animals, for example. MITRA Explore is not designed to answer those kind of questions, and we cannot really handle those questions at the moment. So in that sense, if you have period or genre-specific searches, then please make use of the filter option, because this enables the system to do targeted exploration, but better not put them into the prompt, because our system is not able to pass that correctly. Of course, it's always better to search in terms directly in the language that you are looking for. So instead of using English terms, if you can use Sanskrit or Tibetan terms, that's increasing the quality. Yeah, filtering the search is very important, and we got this feedback in the past that some of our users were a bit overwhelmed by the fact that Explore and Deep Research are gathering results from all over the place. But that's to be expected. If you are not narrowing down the search to specific sections of the canon, then it's very likely going to just try to find something relevant from everywhere, and that obviously can be overwhelming. Yeah, while the system is able to function without diacritics, if you add proper diacritics, it will improve the quality. Yeah. Another thing is that MITRA database search currently only provides up to 50 results per query. So we have a hard stop at 50 results. So if you plan to do exhaustive studies of, I don't know, all occurrences of the iti particle in Yogacara literature, then this is not going to work because it will only give the first 50 and then stop. Yeah, and if you have research questions that require to be more specific, then the filters are the appropriate way. So it's very possible that the kind of passage you're looking for is not among the first 50 results. And in that case, yeah, the recommendation is to use the filters in order to limit it to the relevant sections. Now moving on to the Dharma Nexus database. So here, I will say a few words about this, and maybe we can look at it a bit more on the interactive session later. So Dharma Nexus is basically an intertextuality exploration database that works as the main reference system for Dharmamitra and houses the textual corpora of the data that we have on our system. So this is also important to know because Dharmamitra can only find material that is actually in the database. This is not a big surprise. If the data is not digitized, then our search system will also not find it. And in order to understand what data is available on Dharmamitra, the recommendation is, of course, to have a look at our database and to understand what collections we have, what data is available. And we can do that together in the workshop. Dharma Nexus provides the monolingual intertextual links for Sanskrit, Pali, Tibetan, and Chinese. So this is, yeah, like literal matches between those languages. If there's the same Sanskrit verse in multiple places, then Dharma Nexus will show this. And the same for Tibetan, for Pali, and for Chinese. Then we also have possibly the biggest collection of multilingual sentence level parallels. So for example, for Tibetan Mahayana Sutras, we have in some cases, we have the Chinese translation aligned on sentence level. So you can click on the sentence and then see the the Chinese version of the Tibetan side by side. And also for Shastric literature, for example, we provide that as well. And currently we are storing about 2 million parallel sentences here. And the interface of Dharma Nexus is much more technical than of the other Dharmamitra functions. So you can see it's like a two-pane database system with, yeah, multilingual display. And it's a little bit clunky, it's a bit technical, but if you really want to understand what is going on behind the scenes of Dharmamitra, then having a look at Dharma Nexus is very helpful. Lastly, the MITRA browser extension. So just briefly, in order to find it, you can Google for Dharmamitra Chrome extension. We also have a Firefox extension that also exists. And it basically enables you with a right click, you can mark a piece of text, and then with a right mouse click, you can choose Analyze with Dharmamitra, or you have the small Dharmamitra icon in the extension bar. And then when you click on that, you will get the translation within your web browser. And it mainly provides the same functionality as the dharmamitra.org translation website, but gives you a convenient in-browser experience. So it is in a way very easy to integrate. Also, when you're working with PDF files, for example, it works directly. The interface is very simple. So after marking something and clicking on that Analyze button, you will get this translation here. And if you have something in Sanskrit, then you will also get some grammatical analysis along with that. Yeah. So to summarize, we have the MITRA workflow system where we start with the translation system, which is mainly here to give draft renderings and a quick overview. It's not perfect and it's not designed to be perfect. So it's not there to replace translators, but to give a starting point, a venture point. And then we have the deep research system, which gives an overview of the intertextuality, the links into Dharma Nexus, and helps to orient the passage in the larger data collection that we have. Then we have the Dharma Nexus system, which gives the source context and also enables to explore deeper textual links in a targeted way. And then lastly, we have the MITRA Explore system that enables a more targeted exploration of specific passages, ideas, and concepts, and has the filter options to narrow down the results for very specific research questions. Yeah, I think this is the introduction presentation. So at this point, I would like to just also say a few words of thank you. So on the one hand, of course, for the Tsadra Foundation that is making the daily operations of Dharmamitra possible, and that is also organizing this workshop together with Dharmamitra. Then to the Center of Integrated Japanese Studies at Tohoku University, which is also hosting Dharmamitra, co-hosting it. And then we have Fokwang AI, which is also significantly supporting Dharmamitra and collaborating with us on tailoring Dharmamitra for the needs of the Fokwang community. And lastly, and very importantly, to Kurt Kreutzer, a professor at UC Berkeley, who has been supporting Dharmamitra for over 2.5 years, and his students and postdocs have been very important in the making this process, this project possible. Yeah, I think at this point I will stop, and I'm happy to invite questions on this presentation. Yeah.
During your presentation, we had some questions in the chat, so maybe we can start with those. I try to find the first one.
I think first of all, the main important thing is, yes, we are recording the meeting, and it will also be put on YouTube, I think, later. So this is as we did with the previous SADA workshop on AI technology as well. So this will come, yeah.
Okay, we had a question from Andrew Christian Kurnawan. When I use other AI, sometimes they hallucinate, lie, or make up something. This I know because sometimes I can just fact check or dig deeper. I haven't encountered with this with Dharmamitra, but that's just because I'm ignorant with the language or the source text, so I can't check. So how can we trust in Dharmamitra's result?
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental limitation of the technology. And of course, Dharmamitra will not replace studying the language properly, I think. And we need to be very clear about that. And in that sense, we try to make sources as accessible as possible from within Dharmamitra. So while we cannot completely avoid hallucinations, we can at least try to provide links that lead back to the actual critical editions and so on. So that's one part of it. And yeah, I think that's just fundamental limitation that we have. We try our best, also by providing English reference translations in the future to give references where you can compare the AI translation against the human translation, and then hopefully the quality will improve by that. Yeah, but hallucinations will happen here as well. That's just a fundamental part of the technology.
And there was a discussion in the chat about the APIs. So what APIs are available or this platform is possible to integrate to other systems. And could you please talk about it a little bit?
Yes, so for our Dharma Nexus database, we have a number of APIs available that you can access publicly, so that's possible. I think we also provide our search engine in API format, So that's also possible, but our translation system is currently not a public API. So this is only accessible via the website. So this is our setup at the moment. Yeah, but if you have a project that requires API access, then also feel free to send us an email, because usually for these functions, it's better to have an agreement on a per project basis. So if you have an idea, if you have a proposal, then please send us an email and we can discuss it. Yeah.
Okay, and there was also one more question from Andrew Christian. What about
Mhm.
the Chinese translation terms? They vary from period to period. Did Dharmamitra account for that variations?
Yes, so this is another limitation at the moment. So Dharmamitra, in a way, is optimized to provide the most probable translation. And of course, for Chinese, this means it is biased towards the Xianzang, Paramata, Kumara, Jiva era of translation. And especially on early material, like for example, Dharmadaksha and earlier, the quality is different. And I think we are working on providing specific modes, and something similar can be said about, for example, Dzogchen literature within Tibetan, or maybe also Burn literature, where Dharmamitra has also very obvious weaknesses at the moment. And yeah, our goal here is to provide specific capabilities where you can select modes. For example, you can define an early Chinese mode that will then change the translation style in order to reflect the material. And the same we plan for Dzogchen and for Burn literature. So one by one, we want to extend the functionality to cover that. Yeah, but currently, it will not be ideal for early Chinese material. Yes.
Okay, next is Sarah Taub. Is there any thought that the database might eventually expand to include non-Buddhist sources like Shaiva, Advaita Vedanta text, etc.?
Yes, so for Sanskrit, we already have a substantial body of non-Buddhist literature. So this is, of course, the Gretel project has a lot of e-texts made available over many years, which is a great resource. Then we have also e-texts from Mukta, and we are also doing our own OCR efforts. So we have already expanded in that regard, but it's an ongoing effort. And obviously for Sanskrit, there's really no end in sight when it comes to finding new text and new additions to add. So we try to extend that as much as we can. Yeah.
Okay, next question, Sakshi Upadhyay. I have a concern regarding the black box nature of the translations, since I don't know if the tool is actually following strict grammatical rules or just guessing based on patterns. How can we be sure of the linguistic accuracy? Is there any way to check the grammatical logic behind the output?
Mm. I think I think the short answer would be not really. So we need to be honest here. For Sanskrit, it's a bit better because we do have our dedicated grammar engine that can give some insight into the layout of the compounds and so on. For Tibetan, I think it is difficult. Yeah. So in that sense, the machine has obvious limitations, and yeah, we cannot fully explain how the translations are generated. Yeah.
And there were some questions regarding the OCR, so I combined these questions.
Mm. Yeah.
For example, how the OCR can handle handwritten text and manuscripts, and how does it handle Chinese written texts?
Mm.
Or is it just
Yes.
handle the printed books well?
Yes. So I think our two OCR engines are quite different in profile, and the one that we have for Tibetan is really optimized to handle mainly material that is also in BDRC. So this is like Petra format material, even though it can also handle printed books. I think we tested that and it's doing quite well, but it's really optimized for the Petra format. And in that sense, block prints in Uchin, I think should be really stable. There might be, I think you can try it on Ume as well, and I saw it also appeared in the questions, I think, about Ume. So it is able to handle Ume. It's not yet handling Ume perfectly. I think we need to manage our expectations. But I think it may be the first model that can be somewhat usable for Ume as well. So that is possible. For Sanskrit, yeah, I think page format, it's kind of printed Devanagari text in a critical edition, or in any like book format edition is what it can handle. Manuscripts, handwritten material, I would be very careful. I wouldn't expect the system at the moment to handle that. We haven't done any manuscript-specific data collection yet, and that would be a major effort. Of course, it would be great to do that, but it's just a little bit beyond the scope of a project like Dharmamitra to provide that. But yeah, it would be a great project to work on in the future. And for Chinese, I would say the system is probably rather reliable because Chinese OCR is very mature by now. That's in general, I think the technology has gone a long way for that. Yeah, so I would recommend to try it out and see if it works. And if there are problems, then please let us know. Yeah.
Okay, next question from Lowell Cook. I was wondering if you might say a little more about the visualization section of Dharmamitra. I ask because I have been recently learning about stilometry to determine the authorship and period of certain texts.
Yes. So we do have a visualization on Dharmamitra for the Sanskrit literature in our collection. So this is the e-text that we have integrated from projects like Gretel, Sardit, and the Sanskrit Digital Buddhist Canon and others. And we have done basically a combination of secondary literature and Bayesian modeling in order to date the text. And this is, of course, very approximate, and it needs to be said in advance that we are not saying this is a definite dating of this text, but it's mainly there to give an orientation and an idea of what date ranges the text could have. And currently, we don't include Pali material in that. We also don't include the Gandhari material and other like non-Sanskrit in quotation marks text. So it's a bit limited, but it does provide those datings. And yeah, if you have specific questions about Stilamati, for example, also feel free to write me an email. I would be very happy to discuss that. And I think authorship attribution around this is a very, very interesting problem, and I have some ideas on that. So if you have interest to discuss that, then please send me an email. Yeah.
Okay, next question from Philip Maas. I had difficulties finding the metadata for Sanskrit editions from which the Dharmamitra e-text were generated. Did I overlook something?
I think, I mean, I can very briefly, we have this in the segment view, we have the metadata button, and by clicking on that, the metadata will open. But then we also have added this to Dharma Nexus. If you click on the title of a text, it will show the metadata. It's true that until when did we add that? About a month ago, I think. So until maybe end of May, this was not available. That's true. And that was a true limitation of the system. So we have just added it a couple of weeks ago. So this is a new functionality, but it should be accessible now. And maybe in the workshop part later, we can also show once how to open that. Yeah.
Next question from a user. Is it possible to add semantic prompts for translation, non-date, period, location, school, etc.?
Yes, I think this is a great idea, and we are currently working on a more comprehensive translation interface that allows to set custom prompts and also to upload your own glossary, for example, and own reference translations. So this will be part of an update in the future. At the moment, it's not yet possible, but we absolutely understand that this would be great for our users. Yeah.
Next from Benjamin Goldstein. For the citation function, will the stable link update as you add features to MITRA?
So the idea of the stable link is to really be as stable as possible. So whatever you see in a certain moment, this will be stored in the database. So if we later change the translation system or we add new functionality, then the stable link will still give you the same output that was there at the time when you generated that answer. So the idea is really to make it possible to take a snapshot of the output and to keep that permanently. So in that sense, it will not be affected by updates, but that should be a good thing because we want to make sure that our output is, being referred correctly in that regard. Yeah.
Okay, Marcus Perman's question. I noticed with the Dharma Nexus search for Tibetan, I cannot use ArcITS number to search, but have to use Derga numbers for canonical texts. But don't you refer to ArcITS system text? Might be useful to allow for ArcITS number search.
Yes, no, I agree about that. That would be really helpful to add. So right now it's totally right. We are limited to the Dirge numbers, but I think that would be helpful. So we will put it on the list. Yeah.
Okay, and the last question. Sometimes when I set my translation to Tibetan, it provides it in Wiley rather than Tibetan font. How do I adjust my settings to get it in Tibetan font?
This is a good point, and I think we haven't really added the option to change the output script at the moment. I think for Tibetan, it's indeed a coin toss. It will sometimes generate Wiley and sometimes generate Tibetan script. So this is a good point. Let's try to unify this. So we will add an option to change that and to toggle that.
Okay, one more last.
Yeah.
Hi, if the user would like the translation to be based on a specific terminology database on a specific web page, would Dharmamitra translation be able to support that?
Yes, so this is going to come in an update in the future. So we want to add the ability to upload your own custom glossary, for example. If you have like an Excel table or some Word document with definitions, then we will add that to the system. So currently, not yet, but it will come. Yeah.
I think that was all the question in the chat. So I think
Yeah.
if there is someone who would like to ask any further questions, then you can raise your hand with the React button and you can ask questions. I will call your name on. Okay, I do not see anyone yet.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
maybe
one
we have.
question from Arunaditya Das. Please ask your
Hello, am I
question.
audible?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Arun. I'm from Pondicherry. Um, it's a very simple question. I would just like to know if there's any way of finding out the extent of the text that the Dharma Nexus uh, database covers. Where can I find out all the text and the extent of what it covers?
Yes. I mean, let's just have a quick look at that. We can do that in the workshop session in more detail, but I will just quickly show how to do that. So one moment. Let me share my screen in a second. So you should be now seeing the Dharmamitra here. And we have this database button here. And that database button, you can basically go to the Sanskrit part and it will then render the Sanskrit text and you can then access that here. So this is the place where that is possible, yeah. So yeah, via the database, first set the language and then you can see this. So we have this organized via Buddhist scriptures, which roughly equals to the Kangyo collection in Tibetan. Then we have the treatises, which is the Tengyo collection in Tibetan. And then we have Mukta Bodha, for example, then epic literature, for example, Mahabharata, Ramayana. We have Kavya as well, Puranic literature, and so on and so on. So all of this is available here. So this is the overview. And then if you have something specific, like for example, if we stick to Stiramati, you can just type in the name and then you will find the texts that are in our database linked to Stiramati, for example. Or if it's a text like the Mahabharata, for example, you can also type in Mahabharata and then you will see that. So we have the ability to search here, but also you can browse this by collection, and this will then hopefully give you an overview of what we have in the database. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question from Christian, please.
Hello, I'm not sure if my camera, wrong camera. Apologies for that.
Works.
First of all, thank you for the fantastic work. I wanted to ask, you said that for the tokenization or word segmentation, you would like to have a better solution. And I was just wondering what you think would be required, what are you using now, and whether any of the existing segmenters like Botok or something like that would, in your opinion, fit the bill, or whether you think something would need to be implemented that is better than that. And of course, I'd be happy to also provide word lists for the dictionary content if that is of any use.
Oh, great, great. Yeah, I think it's actually, the more I think about it, the more I think this is actually multiple problems that are hiding under one umbrella, because we have on the one hand, for example, literature translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan, where the segmentation would ideally follow, for example, compound structure and so on that we have in the Sanskrit, because this is how the translators likely worked. So that would be very desirable for that material. Then I think autochthonous literature would require a very different solution. But then also, I think the dictionaries are great. Dictionaries also have a bit the problem that they can be overproductive. And in a sense, if you have a dictionary that has a lot of, say, I don't know, Abhidharma technical terminology, but you're reading a text that is a Dzogchen text, and it might grab things that are really don't make any sense, and just the word list and the matching alone are limited. The question is, how can we fix that? And I think in my sense, it's probably a divide and conquer thing, where we first start with annotation of material translated from Sanskrit, where maybe a small tree bank would be a good solution, and then also do targeted annotation of text that are autochthonous in order to get that. And then I think one by one we can probably approach the problem. But it is a really challenging one. I think it looks simple, but I think it's not really. And at the moment, what we do is basically a greedy matching of the dictionary entries, and then we try to nudge the model in a way that it does something meaningful with it. And it's like, I think it's let's say a 80% okay solution, but the 20% that don't work out are really a bit annoying, I think. And that is what happens all the time. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, and thank you. And also your work is very, very fantastic. I'm a great fan. Yeah.
Yours certainly is. If there's anything I can do to help with my limited capacity, I'm always happy to try.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, I see your hand up, Andrew. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you need help with anything. I have a computer science background, as well as a Buddhist background, but it's non-academic. It's like as a practitioner, so to speak. And I also have a good foundation in Chinese, and I'm also currently unemployed. I'm actually trying to get into a master's program to do Buddhist studies, probably in Taiwan, but that's not going to start till spring. So I actually have a lot of free time. So if there's any, you can contact me directly, or we can talk about it later. But if there's help you need with stuff, I have the time.
Yeah, we are of course always happy to to discuss about like projects we can do, and feel free to send us an email and follow up, and then we can be a bit more specific about if there's like a sub project we can do together. So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, this is great. Yeah.
Okay, we have 3 more questions in the chat, so maybe I can read them aloud, and that can be concluding this session. I have been using Tibetan text in Dharma Nexus for some time, and I have noticed that the line numbers could change when I revisit them. This makes citing difficult. How can I prevent this?
I think this is probably referring to one change that we made. And this is, I think about 3 months ago, we switched our e-text basis for Tibetan from the old ASIP e-texts, which are, to my knowledge, based on a Lhasa recension of the Kangyo, to the Isukya version, which is based on the Dirge recension. And this has changed the numbers, yes. And obviously that is annoying, but it was really necessary in order to make it possible for us to link our Tibetan text with RKTS and with the TODA database, because those projects are using the Dirge representation. And also the e-text of the Isukya team is better proofread by now. It has been vetted more, and there are also a number of texts available uh, in uh, in the Dirge version that is not available in the Lhasa version. So there were many reasons to make this change. But yeah, it changed the numbers of the Tibetan text, so sorry for that. Yeah.
Okay, next one from Sakshi Upadhyay. In Vedic interpretation, a single word can have multiple meanings according to Nirukta. When translating a Vedic mantra, how does this tool handle this ambiguity? Does it rely on specific contextual analysis to choose the appropriate meaning, or does it provide a random selection based on its database?
So I think this targets already one of the core problems of machine translation in general, I think, and we don't have a good way to render all possible meanings according to Neokti, for example. That is not possible. And also you have other linguistic phenomena in Sanskrit, like Shlesha, for example, which our system is also not able to handle properly. So this is a clear limitation. We always try to do our best on ambiguous phrases to, let's say, provide one solution that is plausible. But yeah, it's not capable to handle that. And I think it's in general, machine translation technology has not been engineered in ways that it's really optimized to handle those cases. So yeah, there's this clear limitation.
Okay, and the next one from J1 and just a note on the explore function. I set the filter to exact match, but the result, especially further down the list, seemed to ignore the exact match filter. I searched Sanjay Jamsang.
Okay, no, that's a good hint. I will check this if there's something we can do about that. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all the question we have now in the chat again. So if there is any last questions, please do not hesitate to raise your hand.
I think if not, we might take a 10-minute break and then we can continue with the workshop part. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then maybe at what would that be? 6:15 European time. That must be yeah, around 12 minutes from now. So let's continue after that. Yeah.
Okay, we do not close this meeting, so please keep your camera and microphone muted and okay. So can we start?
I think it's good. Should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, so I think if anyone still has any questions about the presentation, now is the time to ask them before we move on to the second part. Please raise your hand. Okay, then we can move on to the second part, which is an interactive session of our workshop. And there will be looking together at a series of case studies and mapping out where Dharmamitra can support researchers in these processes and the questions that come up along the way. And I would like to explain how this discussion part will unfold a little bit. First, we will kindly ask the participants who submitted the materials earlier to briefly walk us through their problem statement one by one. These materials were already sent out to registered participants in advance, so everyone can follow along at their own pace on their own device. And we also project them on the screen during the presentation, so you can watch them with us as well. And after each walkthrough, I will hand over to Sebastian, who will give a live demonstration of how Dharmamitra can help with these specific problems. And after that, we warmly encourage everyone to ask questions, share observations, comments, or suggestions. And we hope this will spark a lively collaborative discussion around the material and problems brought to the table. And if you have questions or comment, please use the raised hand button and wait to be called on by name, as until now we did. Before we begin, let me quickly go over the order in which contributors will present their materials. They also numbered in the same order in the shared folder, so you can find more easily. So the first will be Catherine Querl, and then Dylan Essler and Yadi Ku, then John Newman, and finally Philip Maas. So first, I would like to ask Catherine Querl to briefly walk us through her case. Catherine, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Great.
Yes,
Thank you.
great. Welcome. Please share with us your material.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I used Dharmamitra to translate a passage from Tibetan, and I also tried to do some initial research on that passage using Dharmamitra. The passage itself is quite straightforward, I would say, in Tibetan. It's also just one short passage, and it's the opening section of a commentary on the first Vajra statement of the single intention, the Gongchik. And in the file here, you can see the Tibetan source text that I entered, and also you see Dharmamitra's translation output. And within the translation output, there's some gray highlights that indicates, or they indicate my own corrections and notes. So these were places where I think that the translation still needs improvement. And then there are also two yellow highlights, and they mark the names of two Buddhas that appear in the text, and one is associated with an exceptionally long lifespan and the other one with an unusual short one. So when I saw this pairing, then I thought that it might be based on a canonical source. So I tried to use Dharmamitra's research function to explore the names of these two Buddhas. And I must say, when I did that, I wasn't aware of the difference between the research and the explore functions, and I'm still not totally sure what the difference is. So I think I used the research function, but I'm not 100% sure. And then, as you can see from my notes, that's where I ran into some difficulties. So one issue was the Sanskrit names of the two Buddhas. They were inconsistent between the translation and the research function. And then in the end, I moved away from Dharmamitra and used 84,000 glossary search to identify the Buddhas and find a plausible Sanskrit form. Then I went back to Dharmamitra and tried to verify these two, or especially one of the names. And then I had difficulties finding the links to the scholarly editions or scanned source texts regarding the name of this Buddha. So yeah, so basically I went back and used more conventional research tools such as 84,000 glossary or ArcITS and scans of printed editions of the Sanskrit text. Yeah, so that's what I did, and I was yeah, overall I think I was quite impressed by the quality of the translation. I would estimate that around 70 or maybe 80% of the passage was translated accurately. And yeah, but in the case of the research function, I didn't find it especially helpful in this case. Yeah, so that's maybe the summary of my little passage here. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Katrin. I think first of all, the machine translation is usually weakest around names, and this has, for some reason, always been the case already, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we started to work on this, that while the grammatical structure and the overall functioning of the verbs and so on, this was something the models learned very quickly. The names remain problematic for a long time, and I think if we look at the data that we have in order to train the system, it also makes somewhat sense because names are always, I think, the items that have the most most room for variation. Yeah, somebody prefers to maybe keep the names in Tibetan, for example, in a certain case. Others might go directly for the Sanskrit and use that directly, and some might try to render it properly into English. That can also be done. Yeah, so you have at least 3 different ways, and maybe 4 or 5. Then some people like to use diacritics properly. Other people say, okay, it's enough to not use the diacritics, but then to still kind of Sanskritize the terms. And we really have everything in our data, and it's very, very difficult to come to one solution that fits all of this. And this is exactly why the translation of names also in Dharmamitra is something that is a bit flickery and unstable. Yeah, so that certainly happens. Yeah, then I think when it comes to the research function, I mean, we can try. Let me see if I can switch to the Dharmamitra window. Yeah, so I think with your passage, so now we have this specific term. We can go to explore, for example, enter this term, and yeah, this will then find a couple of references, hopefully, that can be helpful. So yeah, so that is one way to approach this. I think it can be tricky with, for example, extended Wiley. This is one of those things. I think I'm not sure. Is the large set in your document, is that intended, or is that a part of extended Wiley? I'm not sure about that.
That's neither. It wasn't intended and
Okay.
not part of extended Wiley. I don't know how that happened.
Okay. So because that really makes a difference in the quality of the results, and especially for for Tibetan Wiley, this is very, very tricky because the Wiley is, I think, a very interesting way of transliterating text because it's very different from how the original script in Tibetan works. So the way the surface form is. So this is why uppercasing really makes a difference. But if we input it in lowercase like this, then yeah, you find the passage of the Samadhi Rajata Sutra, which is maybe the one that gave you the hint about the Chandra Anana. So that surface is here. Yeah, so in this case, Explore, I think, is a good place to start because it will look through the Tibetan works that have recorded Sanskrit passages and then gives you that overview. So here you get that. Yeah, I think now coming to the metadata, and you raised that question about the edition and how to get the sources. And I think this might also link to something that Philip Maas asked previously about. So when we have a result like this, for example, we have a piece of Sanskrit text that might be relevant to the search query that we have. We can click on the View Segment button, and this then enables to unfold the metadata here, which gives most of what we could gather. So our e-text in this case is based on the Gretel edition. So this is where we have sourced this form. We have the link to the original Gretel version, and then we also have the Tibetan translation, the Chinese translation recorded. So this is a starting point. We also have the edition information if that was given in the Gretel e-text. Now, I think you mentioned in your question that in a lot of cases we do require much more secondary literature and information than what is available here. Yeah, and I also completely agree about that. The problem here is that we don't really have the capacities to input all of that data into our system in a reliable way. So right now we can say, okay, this e-text is based on this edition. That far we can go, but if there is another edition or multiple editions of the same Sanskrit text, we don't have a comprehensive catalog of that. And that also extends to the secondary literature, where we cannot really at the moment not really give an overview of who else has published on this text and so on. So that is currently a limitation of the system. Yeah.
And is there a link to the scans of Vaidya's edition, or?
So we have links to the scans of those editions that are available on archive. So if there is a PDF version of that on archive.org, then we provide the link on Dharmamitra. So I think we don't have it recorded in the database for this Vaidya edition. It might be on archive. So there's a possibility that we haven't added it yet. We have done about 600 Sanskrit texts so far, I think, where we have the links to the archive version, but for this one we don't have it. And of course, the problem here is very obvious that a lot of the editions are, of course, under copyright, so we cannot just freely upload the PDFs. And archive is a stopgap solution because, yeah, some of the texts are available on archive. So if that is the case, then we can at least provide a link to archive where you can access the original. But I think, unfortunately, for 70% of the Sanskrit material, the archive link is not available at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's for the explore function. I think the rendering with Chandramukha, so if I go to the translation part, we might see that happening. I think that is just not the greatest translation. Yeah, so if we go here, I think Chandra, yeah, we have Amitayus here, and then we have Chandramukha, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think that is happening here. Yeah. I think there's also one thing to be aware of, that Dharmamitra in general has a certain sweet spot on the length of the passage that you input. So if it's too short, then it will lack the necessary context to come to a good rendering. But if it's also too long, then at some point it will start to also lose a bit of the quality. So that's another problem. Yeah. But yeah, especially consistency on the proper names in multiple paragraphs, that can be a limitation. Yeah.
And could you say a little bit more on the difference between the research and the explore function? So
Yes.
what would you recommend? When should we use the explore function and when the research function? Because I think what I did was I just took the part where the Buddha's name is mentioned, but the full sentence, or at least some part of it, and then I used that in the search in the explore function, or also the research function, and then the passage from the Samadhi Raja didn't show up.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So the main difference between research and explore is that research will kind of happen in the same window. So you stay in your translation window. You're not being teleported into another function. So this is, I think, very convenient that you stay in your translation workflow, and then yeah, the results are shown along with the translation work that you are doing. So it doesn't require you to switch into a different mode. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage of the research mode is that it doesn't give you the capability to apply any filters. So in this case, if you want to look specifically for Sanskrit renderings, for example, you can do that in the Explore option. But here in the research mode, you don't have the filter settings. It's really just for translation, basically. And in a way, I think if you just want to have a quick overview of the intertextuality and of possible references, then research is a great place to start, but it's not the best way to do yeah, more targeted queries. So for that, I would recommend to use Explore. So yeah, research is a bit more closer to a translation workflow, I would say, and Explore is more for search workflows. But on the technological level, they are very similar. The biggest difference is that the Explore version provides you the filter options, and it also will like make some more targeted narrowing down of the results. Yeah. While deep research is more general and tries to go across all languages and provide something that could be relevant. Yeah.
Also, one thing is that I couldn't find the filter options in my
Okay.
Explore. Is that maybe is there a difference in like which browser I use, or
It should be available, so you can click on the settings. And the one thing is that in order to get the filter here, you need to first select the language that you want to filter for. So that is,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yes, because obviously we can only show the source once the language has been decided, because otherwise we would have to render all the options into the source menu. That would be too much. But if you set Tibetan, then you get the option to choose specific collections. So you can then set it to yeah, Kangyo and Tengyo and so on. So that becomes possible after that. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of necessary. But if you don't do it, then this will not be selectable. Yeah.
May I jump in for one quick thought?
Sure.
About the importance of the right settings. If you go back to the translate program, if you set the settings for Wiley and not leave it on auto detect mode, then it will find Chandranana and not render it as Chandramukha. So these small nuance things in the settings can really help to get better results.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think now as you say this, we get Chandranana. Yeah, something new that I didn't know as well.
Also, I already see that some other issues were solved now. That's interesting. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about a reason why it is better in Wiley, but yeah, I think maybe our the system to select the encoding automatically might not always make the best choices. So yeah, so that's also good observation, Sada. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think then you asked in your document about the citation part. So as we are now looking at this together, we have the citation link here. So by clicking on that, something should happen. Maybe it's let me refresh the window. Yeah. This is a bit odd, but let me generate a new translation. Yeah, it might be that the passage is very long. That could have an influence, of course. Let me check if it maybe works on a shorter passage here. Oh yeah, it was there for a moment. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so here you go. Of course, in the case of a long passage like this, you obviously also get a long citation, but I think it should be totally fine to shorten this because the whole passage will be in the link. So you can, of course, edit the citation a little bit, but this link will remain accessible. So by clicking on that link, here, and I think it should also be here. Yeah, it can be opened. And I don't know if you now see the link. Is it visible? Okay, yeah. So then, yeah, the input that you gave to the system as well as the response will be preserved on that link. And then also the different citation options are down here. So that's one way to cite it, of course. I mean, I don't know what the current guidelines are about AI usage for academic work. I think it's probably used a lot and people mostly don't cite the usage of that. And it's also, of course, it's obviously not mandatory to cite Dharmamitra. We just want to provide the option for those of you who want to do that. It would be nice, I think. It would contribute a bit to the transparency about the use of these tools. But yeah, I think obviously a lot of people are relying on these tools without always mentioning that. Yeah. Yeah. I think when it comes to, because you also made the point about the linking to RKTS maybe and to other pages. So for that, I can maybe briefly just demonstrate that we have this in Explore. And yeah, if you have results like this, for example, is a Tango result. So here we have the links both to our database here, Tokyo University, the TODA database, and to RKTS as well. So this will give you the yeah, the folio level. So you get the actual page of the result. So that hopefully helps to work with our original source. Yeah. Yeah, but then I think the combination of this tool with 84,000 glossary, for example, is really a good idea. And probably we need to look for the best of both worlds when we do our work. Yeah, so Dharmamitra can give some ideas and might also give some insights that might not be easily accessible, but then at the same time without reference, without looking up reliable reference tools like the 84,000 glossary and others, it will be difficult to only trust what the system is producing. Yeah, do we have?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of the other questions you actually already answered in your presentation today. So I also would hope for more links to source text, as in the case of the Samadhi Raja Sutra, to actually be able to check the scanned, let's say, Vaidya's edition of the sutra. That would, of course, be nice. And also other things you mentioned today, like that one could upload one's own glossary would be very nice, very helpful. And also reference to existing translations, also with scans, if possible. I think these were the case, like all the things that you already mentioned in your presentation. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, I think the limitations for that are, of course, on the one hand, we cannot automatize the creation of these databases completely. So when it comes to secondary literature, who has written what on which topic, that still requires a lot of manual checking. And in that sense, we are a very small team, so we don't really have the resources to do that, even though I would hope that we can improve in the future. And yeah, I think for other translations and other reference material, there's also the small problem of copyright, which I think can be worked with on if there's the way to make agreements with people who have done the translations and the publishers of the translations. Yeah, but I'm happy that we can provide some of those references on the website, so that's already a start. Yeah, but thank you very much. Yeah.
So does anyone have questions or comments on this point? Please feel free to ask questions and raise your hand. Even if it is not technical, just regarding this interesting passage of text or any comments.
I have a
Yes.
small question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. There's Tibetan Sanskrit dictionary by Negi, published in Central University of Higher Tibetan Studies in Sarnath, Varanasi, India. And it gives, for Daveshal, it gives Chandramukha. And it cites Shiksha Samuchaya, if I'm not mistaken, because the source is abbreviated. But I do think that Shasta means Shiksha Samuchaya. So I have this question. So you didn't include this dictionary, Tibetan Sanskrit dictionary by Negiji into your database?
No, we don't have Negi in our translation pipeline. So actually, we don't use dictionaries for our translation system directly, because our experience in the past is that dictionaries usually bring more problems than they solve, because there's and I think Negi is in a way a good example. It's an amazing achievement. It is a fantastic work, but then one term I think can have so many possible definitions, and unless you really know in the context what you need to work with, it just creates a lot of confusion. And this is exactly what happens with the AI models. Then if we provide too much contextual information, it really degrades the quality. And for that reason, we are not including Negi, but it's interesting that it has actually Chandramukha. So maybe there's some yeah, I think we certainly have trained on the Shiksha Samuchaya, because we have aligned the Tibetan and the Sanskrit rendering. So I'm sure the model has seen this rendering, and I wouldn't be surprised if it has picked up that at some point. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. This is a good observation. It's interesting to see that. Yeah.
Okay, we have two more questions. Please, Philippe Maas, go ahead.
Yes, hello, and yeah, thank you for this wonderful workshop. Nice to see you all. Yeah, the first remark that I wanted to make goes into the same direction like the previous one, namely the inclusion of dictionaries. Maybe it would be great, for example, to have Edgerson's Buddhist Hybrid Sanskrit dictionary, who has a reference to Chandrananda with a concrete reference to where this is found. That would be maybe useful. And for the explorer function of Dharmamitra, I think that SARS 3, South Asian Research Documentation Service, that was created by the University of Halle a couple of years ago, which has a keyword search for articles, might actually be a wonderful research to include for you.
This is a great idea. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. I think I will look into that, how to integrate that. And yeah, about the dictionary, in this case, we'll probably, because we have already integrated Edgerton, but only for the Sanskrit headwords in the grammatical function. So it only works in that sense. And it also is a bit problematic in quotation marks, because our grammatical engine is based on the DCS by Oliver, and that is obviously a classical Sanskrit resource. So it is great on Vedic and on classical Sanskrit, but it really doesn't map Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit well, which is also not the intention of the project. And it also doesn't map Prakrit or like any other like Pali, and not to speak of Pali. I think this is really where the coverage goes down. And obviously Edgerton's entries only go so far. Yeah, and in that sense, there's certainly work to be done to create a good grammatical parser for Buddhist hybrid material, and then also, yeah, I think the reverse lookup to be able to include the obvious results for the Tibetan to Sanskrit would be great. I think here would be really helpful. So that's also a good thing to add. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next, Mita Trivedi, please. We are listening you.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the dictionary thing. Would it be possible to not include a translation of the dictionary, but just a reference to the entries in the dictionary to not to avoid complications with the translation that it puts out, and also at the same time to give options for looking for meanings in like entries in dictionaries, minimize the legwork that someone would have to do, still be able to use the tool productively.
Yeah, I understand, because on the one hand there are already dictionary websites out there. So of course the Cologne Sanskrit Dictionary Project, they've done fantastic work, and we have also integrated the outcome of that in our system. But I can understand that you don't want to have 4 tabs open and then always switch between them. And I think this is really the problem that we have here. And I must admit that I have had the same experience working with the Cologne dictionaries in the past. It's not their fault. I think it's really just the problem of different resources that need to be orchestrated. Yeah, so good point. I think it would be really nice to integrate them just to make that one click less. Yeah, so you have it in the same place. So yeah, let us see what we can do. I think it's a nice idea. Yeah, and in a way, we already have it a bit in the grammar function, but that is limited because you cannot start your own queries. Yeah, you don't have the option yet. So we should do that. So yeah, good idea.
Okay, then Ujjwal Kumar, please go ahead.
Hi, Sebastian. Good evening from India.
Yes.
Actually, I am working with the Pali text and sometimes also using the Hindi translation in your site, and the translation is almost good, correct? But I have the issue with the grammatical analysis of the tools. I don't find out the compound. I think your tool is not analysis the compound, gender, and the vibhaktis are it shows, but not the compound. I think it would be better if we also enhance the capacity of the app and add this compound, Pali compound. And what is the the criteria of adding more text, and especially the Hindi translation, I mean the Indian language translation? Is there any future scope to add some more Indian languages? Like for example, there is other one Southeast Asian language, Thai. Thai is not there. So do you have any plan to add Thai or some important language like in India, like Bengalis, etc.?
Yes, very good questions. And to go one after the other. So I think I understood you correctly. You're mostly working on Pali, yeah? So that is what you're looking at. Yes. Okay, so for the compound analysis, this exactly strikes at the problem that we have, because our tree bank, our grammatical annotations are only available for classical, and we haven't really done any work on annotating Pali. And it would be great to do a project on this, and I would be very happy to collaborate if there's a team that wants to work on this. I don't think we have to annotate, let's say, 100,000 sentences. It will probably be enough to do maybe 1,000 or 2,000, but that could help to like bootstrap a system that can handle Pali properly. And it would be really great to fill this gap. I think right now it's exactly as you describe. On compounds, it just falls apart and it can't render them. So that is yeah, would be great to do that. When it comes to the literature, to the Indian languages, yes, we unfortunately don't have much Hindi data in our system, and I would also, I myself don't read Hindi. This is a bit sad, but yeah, I think it would be great to work together with a team that wants to add Hindi. I think it would be great. I think there's a lot of data
If
out
I
there that
want
we
to,
could add to
if
the
I want to
system.
support or to join you, what is the process? How I can add the Hindi or the Indian languages in the system?
I think the easiest way would be really to just digitize Hindi translations, or to even just provide us with PDF files of Hindi translations, and we can take it from there, or just like a PDF file of a specific Sanskrit text, of Pali text, and so on. And ideally, if they're already OCR'd, if they're already in a machine readable format, that is even better, but we can even do that. So I think we can absolutely discuss a collaboration on that. Yeah.
No, the next question which I would like to ask you is that even the Hindi translation is not very good, the standard translation we don't have still, even the Pali Tripitaka. We don't have the translation of commentaries and some commentaries, etc. Very few texts you will get in a good Hindi translation. So in that case, how you proceed?
I think this is a general problem that we also have for Pali into English, I think, even though it might be less severe, because obviously the sutras have been translated multiple times, but then the commentaries, there's only selected pieces that have been done, and so the coverage is very uneven. Yeah, I think we can make use of English as a bridge when we want to go to Hindi and other languages, so English can help to fill the gap. But yeah, we might just hit real limitations at some point, I think. So yeah, commentaries is challenging, yeah. Yeah, and I think also the same goes for Thai. I think you mentioned Thai as a target
Yeah, there
language.
is no Thai, I think. There is no Thai translation in your app.
Yeah,
Recently,
unfortunately.
I was in Thailand, and some senior monks. I just introduced your app to some senior monks there, and they were very surprised and happy to see. But again, they cry that there is no Thai. What's wrong with this app? Why Thai is not working? I don't know. There is no Thai at all. So
I think it would be great. I think it would be really great to add Thai to Dharmamitra, and I'm sure there's a Thai rendering of the Pali Canon, and it would require some data collection to have
you might
this
know
data.
that the Thai government even now providing, they are running some translation project, but from Thai Siam Ratha edition to English. So might be you can collaborate with some big, temple or some funding agency in Thailand.
Yeah. No, it would be great. I think there's no reason not to have Thai on Dharmamitra, to put it that way. So whatever can be done, yeah. And I think similar for Vietnamese, for example, would also be very helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any more questions for this presentation or this topic? Okay, if not, then let's move on maybe to the next presenter. Okay, Dylan Essler, are you with us?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Please go ahead and present your case.
So the text here is the Guyendu Tilaka, or also it's known as the Chandaguya Tilaka, which is a back translation of the title from the Tibetan. And this is classified as one of the Niruttara Yoga Tantras. And so it's found in the Tibetan canon. The Toku number is there, 477. And it's also found in the versions of the Nyingma Gyubum, say the alternative canon for the Nyingma school. And this passage is drawn from chapter 6, and so it's a chapter which explains how the various Brahmanical deities are terrified by the wrathful manifestation of the Buddha, and each of them, tries to take refuge in another one, and it goes on, and basically they all are afraid. Now, what was interesting in this passage is that at some point, so the point is given in yellow on the screen, at Tutrul Ne, all the Kangyur versions break off in mid-sentence, and they omit basically half a page of text, which is then reinserted at a later point in the narrative, but it doesn't follow logically, so it breaks the narrative structure. And fortunately, the correct order is found in the versions of the Nyingma Gyubum. And so in the document here, I provided, the Tibetan as it's found in the Kangyo versions with the translation as if that were correct, which it is not. And then again, I provided the text as it's found in the Nyingma Gyubum versions with the full passage in the proper sequence. So I suppose my questions are at the end of the document. I mean, the first one has already been answered. It was about the preferred choices of technical vocabulary, and you mentioned that this is going to be available in a future update. But my second questions, and I'm sorry, my questions may be a bit naive because I'm fairly new to using this kind of AI-assisted translation technology. But anyway, my questions are, if we have, like in this case, multiple versions of a single passage, and of course with the Dege Kangyo, we have quality e-texts, which is a great thing. And for the, as you mentioned, for the Lhasa Kangyo also, we have good quality e-texts. The ASIP e-texts are very good. But now when it comes to the Nyingma Gyubum material, the e-texts are of very varying quality. So here we have for the Dege Nyingma Gyubum, we have an e-text which is somewhat okay. As far as the Tsamdrak e-text is concerned, it's a very poor quality. And I think for the Tinkye, as far as I know, there is no e-text available. So it would be a case of scanning, doing the OCR oneself. So the question is, when we don't have a reliable e-text, obviously that will affect the quality of the output of the AI translation, or else one has to type in the Tibetan or Sanskrit oneself, which itself may not be that time efficient. And then the other question which follows from that is more generally, if this doesn't risk, leading scholars somewhat astray, because of course there's a great sense of time efficiency with all of this. But e-texts, even good e-texts, are never perfect, and in a sense, one has to always look at the source document, whether it's a physical manuscript or a PDF or a photograph or whatever. And I'd worry a bit about the tendency that might come out, that everyone is going to be happily using e-texts and not looking at the actual texts themselves. And I did have actually another question which came up during the workshop, so I might just add that here if you don't mind.
Please.
So this is more about using Explore in the Dharmamitra functionality. And so is it possible, if we know that there's a Tibetan text that has existed at some point in Sanskrit, to find whether there are any Sanskrit or quotations of that text in Sanskrit, in some Sanskrit texts? Is it possible to find that? So, for example, to put the name of this text, Dasang Tigle, and then to see if there are any Sanskrit texts that quote from it, even though the text itself no longer exists in Sanskrit. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think these are very deep and important questions, and they really also tackle some of the core issues that we have with this new technology. I think first of all, I fully agree with you on the danger that reliance on e-text is creating. And this was certainly already the case when I was in my training 10 years ago, when I learned Sanskrit and Tibetan, that obviously e-texts were around at that time, but then all the problems that e-text collections have, and these are sometimes not even intentionally, but if we think, for example, on the graduate collection, there's the case that we have a couple of Sanskrit texts that are reconstructed from Tibetan or from Chinese. So the Sanskrit has, in that sense, never really existed, but it's the invention of scholars of recent years. And obviously, if you work with that material and you assume that this is a reliable source to quote, then you will go into a lot of trouble. So you cannot just uncritically use an e-text. I think you always have the duty of going back to the original edition and to understand what the edition is actually what the edition wants to say. And that is extremely important. And the same applies to the ASIP e-text, to the Isukia e-text as well. I think they are trying very much to be a helpful resource, and obviously they are. But if the user of the system like Dharmamitra stop at just looking at the e-text, that would be a big problem, I think. So in that sense, we want to make it comfortable to get quickly to the original block print. So this is why we added the links to ArcRTS and to the TODA archive. So at least you previously it was difficult to get there. That was a limitation, but now you only have to click twice to get to the block prints, at least when it is a canonical work in the Kangyo and the Tengyo, then this is possible. For Nyingma material, as you have described, this is a bit of a more complex situation. And the good news here is that together with BDRC, we are currently working on a large effort to OCR and to re-OCR the block prints and the material digitized within the BDRC archive. And that also means that we will be able to, on the one hand, have higher quality e-text, so we have a better representation of that. And also it means we can provide more links to the original block prints and the photographs on BDRC, which I think is the most important part here, because the e-text is only, it's a stopgap solution, so to speak. It makes the search possible, and that's great because now we can search across all of this material. But yeah, I think if you look closely, you will discover some problems on each page, probably. I think that is a bit my experience with ASIP back then, was that some kind of problem can occur very, very quickly. So yeah, these are obviously problems and requires education, I think, for users to understand and for people in training to know about this. I think when it comes to variant readings and the fact that we might have 2 or 3 or 4 different versions of the same text preserved in different Kangyo versions and different paracanonical collections, I think this is a problem that moves out of the domain of a tool like Dharmamitra, and maybe for good reasons. I think, of course, on the one hand, there are machine-assisted translation tools, cut tools, and systems that try to really cover everything. And Dharmamitra is intentionally, we are not trying to do that. So we are trying to provide tools that you can use at specific points in your work. So for example, if you need to render your text from the block print into an e-text, then you can use our OCR system, and it will hopefully save some time to use that instead of typing it in manually. So that's a help, but it still requires the human to check the output and to post-correct it and to make sure that everything is in place. And I'm very sure there will be problems in the OCR as well for the foreseeable future. So that is the one part. And I think also for the translation, if we think about the variant versions as you demonstrated, this requires conscious effort on deciding what we input into the translator, because only in a way, I think it's a bit like garbage in, and then we get also garbage out. So if our input has problems, if there are like philological problems that we couldn't solve on our end, then the translator will just try to make sense of that, and it might be really a bad result. Yeah, so a bad edition obviously leads to bad outcome, but I think this has been also the case before AI. Yeah, so obviously if a text is poorly edited, then how much sense does it make to even translate the text? Yeah, that's a question that can always be raised. And I think in a very similar way, that also applies to AI, that inputting material that is poorly edited doesn't really make a lot of sense, even though one good effect of AI in that regard can be that usually if you have larger problems in the text and you then enter it into Dharmamitra, you quickly see that it creates totally wrong renderings, and the names and everything can be totally off. So if the output of Dharmamitra really makes absolutely no sense, then of course you can first of all criticize the computer and maybe be angry at that, but it might also be a good moment to pause and to think about maybe there's some deeper problems in the text that need to be addressed. So that's also one thing that we observed with some users who reported that Dharmamitra can actually be really helpful to find difficult philological problems in the text, because then the translation really sometimes makes absolutely no sense. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And it's great to know that you're working on these on OCRing the Nyingma collections as well. That's really great to know.
Yeah, we are very excited, and hopefully we can, provide more variated collections on Dharmamitra as well in collaboration with BDRC on this. So yeah, extending the data coverage is really important, and that really also defines how useful the platform can be. Yeah.
Yes. And is the OCR tool that you showed that's available on your website, is it the same tool that BDRC had released a year ago that's now been improved, or is it a completely different one?
So this is a new tool that we are currently actively developing together with BDRC. So it's not yet, let's say, it's not yet at the stage where it's like perfectly polished. So you will see some problems at times. So for example, if you input a blank page, it might create some weird output, or it's, sometimes there are still those smaller problems, but we have compared it against other tools like Google Vision OCR or Gemini, and it's much better. It's maybe currently perhaps the only model that can really handle block prints and UME script to some extent. So yeah, it's currently the best solution, but it still has some problems, and we are working on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm.
And would you maybe mind just seeing whether it's possible to find such Sanskrit parallels for a Tibetan text?
Oh yeah, that question, that's also a good question. So on the one hand, if you have the Tibetan and you have like a passage that is a couple of sentences long, then you can use Explore to discover that. And the way to do that would be to select the target filter and Explore to to Sanskrit, sorry. If you have a Tibetan passage, then you can set the target filter to Sanskrit, and then you can paste in the passage and search for that. On text level, that will be more difficult. So if you only have the text name and you want to find all cases where that might have been existing, that will be more difficult. So in that sense, our system can work with literal cases. So if there's really a literal rendering that is similar in our Sanskrit database, then we have a chance to find it. But if it's a more abstract question, I think it will not be very useful. There's also the problem is that in a lot of cases, citations and textual borrowings are obviously not marked. Yes, so the texts are not telling us where this is taken from and so on. So it's obviously in Indian literature, but also I think in Tibet, the same phenomenon has happened a lot, that people took over passages and pasted them, edited them, and made small emendations. And for that reason, it's really, really difficult to reconstruct this unless we have the textual source actually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, is there any questions from someone to this topic? Yes, Andrew, please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to ask why don't you have X, because I know there's usually a huge amount of work that has to go into making some feature available and like tons of text inputs and all kinds of training and things. But one thing this reminded me of, this last question, what it reminded me of was something I've been thinking about, is the ability to train a system to accept like Chinese and make its best guess at reconstructing the Sanskrit from that. And it seems like we have training material for that. I don't know if there's a sufficient amount, but I know that there are scholarly studies, or even in the source like Chinese, the translators themselves may have mentioned like how they derived this word from the Sanskrit. And I think that would be a really interesting feature to have. So I'm sure it's crossed your mind, or I'm sure someone's brought it up before. But
Yes.
Is there any movement in that direction currently?
So we have used our algorithms to identify almost all passages where we have literal renderings of Sanskrit that is in e-text, so digitally available Sanskrit that is in e-text that has matching Chinese passages. So we have worked on this for a couple of years now, and a lot of that is in the Dharma Nexus database. So if you are looking for that, we have that. And now, obviously, all of this data enables us to do exactly what you were saying, to basically train a model that can go from Chinese into Sanskrit, for example. And I think the use case of that is an interesting one. It would be very experimental. And you might be able, actually, I think on our website, let me check how well it works, because I think in theory you can actually do that. Because
Oh,
we have
wow.
all of our parallel data in the system, so it's all inside. So let me give it a try. Let me check. I just need to find some Chinese. That's the first the first step would be to pick up some Chinese. I will pick something that is obviously not translated. So let me take the introduction of the Chang Wei Shalun. So that, to my knowledge, I mean, it has some echo in some Siddhamati work, but it's not really translated. So let me put the Chinese here and then set the target language to Sanskrit. And this should now make use of our data collection, to my knowledge. So it should use the parallel sentences that we have in our database and then do the reconstruction based on the reference material that we have. Whether this is a great rendering, I'm not sure, but it looks looks like Sanskrit. So yeah. So, I mean,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking of, I mean, a whole text that's asking a lot, but like specific terminology, like
yeah.
if there's really confusion over, like there was a Jan Nadir wrote a paper about, or caused by a Western monk who translated one of the Chinese versions of the Dhammapada or Dharmapada. And there was this word that I think it was Zhiqian, a certain Chinese translator, he'd gotten very creative with the word bhikkhu or bhikshu and translated into hunger ender. And
interesting. Yeah.
to someone whose background was in Pali, but who learned Chinese secondary and didn't know this really weird, quirky translation by this very specific translator, he was completely stumped. So I always think this was what I had in mind, like specific terms. The example I just gave of hunger ender, that would probably be very difficult for a system to figure out. But
yes,
yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of just specific terms.
Yes. I think one tool in that direction could be our lexicon app, which we are currently developing, and it's in the beta phase because we still have a bit of overgeneration of not so precise results. But I think that would be a way to look for renderings of Sanskrit, of Chinese terms and their matching Sanskrit. So that is one way I think you could use that, for example, because that will give precise locations of where a certain Sanskrit term is rendered in a certain way into Chinese, for example. So that is one way. Maybe I can demo the beta quickly, even though it's, I mean, it has some issues, but I think it is in its own way a useful resource. So we have this link here, which leads to the dictionary. And here I will now lead with an Sanskrit term, but you can, for example, for a term like Atma, you can then turn it to Chinese, and this will then give you passages where the term Atma is rendered into Chinese, for example. So this is one way to have this look up based on the passages that we have identified. And you can obviously also do the other way around. You can lead with queries in Chinese. I will just use this term here. And then, you can find possible Sanskrit renderings for that. Like, for example, for Wordgen, you then see Atma Drishti. And here you can also apply the filter. So if you want to go for early Chinese material that is like pre-Kumara Jiva, for example, you could set the filter here accordingly to limit it to that. So I think that is hopefully helping, but it's of course only really functioning on text where we have the Sanskrit and where we have where the matching was successful. So that's not always the case. And I think especially for a lot of the early material, we might actually lack the Sanskrit source to do this.
Okay, great. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, does anyone have questions or comments? If not, then let's move on to the next presenter. Yadi Q, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great.
Please go ahead.
Hi, this text I'm presenting is called Vyakta Bhavanugata Tattva Siddhi. It is originally written in Sanskrit and traditionally attributed to a female author called Yogini Chinta. And this text is widely attested in all major Tibetan canon and paracanonical canon, and their gear number is 2222. One feature of this text is the author's fondness in using extremely long compound. For example, here, given on the screen is a parallel. This Sanskrit is one single sentence ended with the finite verb at the end, udvahati. Yeah. And maybe many question has been asked and has been answered nicely. Maybe the question in my mind is that usually when we perform a search, we enter a limited span of text or some keywords. In this case, what keywords I should put in, and is it possible? How would you think?
Yeah, thank you very much for this wonderful example, Yadi. I think it's a great case of pushing Dharmamitra to its absolute limits, because this is a really, really interesting text. And I was looking at this, so let me share the Dharmamitra in this case. So here we go. So just going back to the translator. So I think there are challenges around this, obviously, and in a way, most database software and systems are very optimized to English language, and they expect words and clear separations and so on. And this is a wonderful example of how Sanskrit can defeat those things. Yeah, we do have the grammatical rendering system. So I think one of the questions you were asking was about the compounds and whether it's possible to break them down. I think it does a somewhat okay job. So the first compound, it kind of gets the breakdown quite okay, but then it does a bit of things that I'm not really convinced of around the Atishaya, and then it does this Sa Raga. So here I think it's pushed to its limit. So I think it cannot really handle this long a sentence structure. So it starts to yeah, do some illogical decisions here. Yeah, I think it's certainly challenging if you want to do the breakdown. It's usually, maybe it makes sense. I think you already have the semicolon in your text, that maybe it's a good idea to add a new line over there, and then it will guide the breakdown a bit, because the system is going line by line. So you can add line breaks in order to make it somewhat chunkable. I'm actually, we can have a look at the explore system, what it's able to do here. So if we go here and then we enter this, and we can set the language to Tibetan in this case. And yeah, it is a long piece of text, but I think it's still somewhat able to recover at least the Tibetan original of that. So that seems to work. So yeah, I think my best advice here would be to try. I think if it works with the full passage, then great. At least in this case, it seems to be able to identify the original source. Then it also finds something from Enigma text, which I don't know if it helps or not. That's a different question. But yeah, if it doesn't give any good results, then it's always a good idea to, yeah, delete parts of it and to try it with shorter queries and to see if that works. Yeah, I think some combinations of individual subcompounds might work. I was trying this filtering for Sanskrit, and I think I was not really very happy with the results, to be honest. I think it only finds a bit of Mahabharata, maybe, which seems rather unrelated. But that might also be a hint that our database doesn't really have material that is very relevant to this. Yeah, so yeah, it's yeah, finding something here, it might be helpful, but I think the overall results, yeah, Vishnu Purana, maybe there's something in there, but in general, it's limited. Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's not so much concrete advice I can give for this text. Certainly a long passage like this will push the system. So if you can reduce it to 2 or 3 lines, something to the length of this, then you will probably get more sensible results. So I think the ideal length for the Explore system is something like, I don't know, 100 to 200 characters in Sanskrit, maybe 500 is still okay. But if you have a long passage like this, yeah, it will maybe not find too much. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe also it has been asked by people that we are actually feeding edited text. And yes, this text is also post-editing, but in transmission, especially this one, because we have a long compound and almost every single word within the compound has so many variants. So yeah, but of course we cannot expect AI to do our job.
No.
But indeed, yeah, the data you are presenting is yeah, is really edited text.
Yeah. I mean, we currently, our database is also just really limited to things that are edited, so we don't have any manuscript data at the moment. I think it would be, I mean, one of my dreams, my personal dreams, would be to add the NGMPP data at some point. Yeah, and that would, of course, first of all, require to have a good OCR for the, or HTR in that sense, a handwritten text recognition for the manuscripts. But if we could do that, I think that would be really great. And in a way, it would be a different application. But for Tibetan, we are more or less at the point where we have a lot of block prints that are digitized, where this is actually feasible to do an OCR and then to connect the OCR directly with MITRA, which has its merits, I think, and would be great to do that for Sanskrit at some point, I think. And then it can be an addition to the edited text can be to also access the manuscript. And maybe there can be a future where, yeah, platforms like this can give people access directly to the manuscript pictures. I think that would be really, really great. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone have questions or comments? Please, if anything comes to mind, don't hesitate to raise your hand. Okay, then let's move on to the next material. John Newman, are you with us?
Yes.
Hi,
Okay,
please. Yes?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. I need 1 second to share your material. I think I just got it. So, okay, here we go. Yeah, okay, it's on the screen, yeah. Yeah, please.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on this. It's a fascinating presentation that you've done already. And I'd just like to start by saying I began using Dharmamitra when you first released it publicly. I don't know when that was, about a year or so ago. And the first time I used it, it completely, to use an Americanism, blew my mind because I was able to track down multiple references to a piece of Sanskrit that I was not aware of. So before we get into my thing specifically, I had a minor technical question. It seemed like you mentioned that there were extensions for Chrome and Firefox. Are there extensions for Safari also?
Oh, that's a good question. No, we don't have a Safari extension yet, but I think it would be good to have that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked is because it seemed like some of the functionality that I was attempting to use it for wasn't working, and I suspect that it's because of my browser rather than Dharmamitra itself. So anyway, I'll try using it within Chrome or Firefox and see if it functions a little bit better. So my question really has to do with issues of translation primarily, I think. And it's, I don't really expect AI to solve this. And I think you mentioned earlier that LLMs basically give you a kind of boiled down version of whatever has gone into them. So they're essentially feeding off existing text in one way or another, whether in Sanskrit, Tibetan, whatever, and then English as well. So I've always been puzzled by the translation of the term swalakshana as it's used in Chandrakirti's works. And in particular, there's a term, Rangitsiniki Madrupa, Rangitsiniki Drupa in Tibetan, which represents in this particular text that I selected, Chandrakirti's Chaturashataka Tika. The underlying Sanskrit lemma is Asiddhaswalakshana. And then the Tibetan translation for that is Rangitsiniki Madrupa. So the problem is that Swalakshana has multiple meanings, as is well known. There's sort of a basic sense of it in terms of being a essential characteristic of a thing, which is defines the thing as such. And then in Dignaga Dharmakirti's system, of course, Swalakshana takes on a somewhat different character, meaning perhaps a unique particular, especially the causally efficient particulars that are the objects of perception. So then in Chandrakirti, it seems that there's a shift in a slightly different direction, perhaps, in which swalakshana, especially in this compound asiddha swalakshana, takes on a different characteristic such that it's referring to a kind of ontological feature of a thing. And within Chandrakirti, this is used in apposition in one passage for with Rangingmo and Rangjin. So my question basically for your workshop is, how can an AI translate this specific usage when there's no real established English term to correspond to it? The Japanese scholar Yoshimitsu Chizuko, if I hope I pronounced her name correctly, has done a series of studies on this term, especially in Tsongkhapa's works having to do with Rangitsuniki Drupa. And she ended up translating or rendering it. Her choice was being established as intrinsically real existence or object, all of that strung out. But translating swalakshana as intrinsically real seems to be quite a distance from its usage in, say, abhidharma or pramana sort of applications. So my basic question is, how can AI facilitate coming up with some kind of accurate English rendering of this when the people, and that applies to other European or other languages as well, when so far scholars who have studied this issue haven't been able to come up with their own, with any kind of commonly accepted rendering of it. In one of Yoshimitsu's notes, she reviews the about 100 years of scholars, particularly into English, attempting to render swalakshana in this particular context of Rangitsuniki Drupa, Rangitsuniki Madrupa. So yeah, that's my basic question is, what can Dharmamitra do if we ourselves as scholars haven't been able to establish a specific understanding of what this term refers to?
Yeah, I think that is maybe the biggest limitation of AI. And I think more generally speaking, tools in general. Yeah. So in a way, the AI is, even though it's quite good at pretending that it's not just a tool, it is by the end of the day just a tool. Yeah. So in a way, a dictionary can only help you if it has an entry that is actually for the term that you are looking up. And I think in a very similar way, AI is great at representing one form of the consensus of how humans understand a text. I think this is like let's say, the biggest expectation or the biggest hope that I have for AI technology, like the one we use in Dharmamitra, is that it can be a convenient and yeah, somewhat trustworthy representation of how humans agree on what a good translation of the terms, or let's say a probable translation, a statistically plausible translation of the terms could be. And it obviously exactly falls apart at those terms where we as humans struggle to come to an agreement as well. So that is technically just the limitation. And I mean, we can argue about this, and it goes a bit into almost philosophical directions, whether AI, by the way it's designed, will ever be able to come up with genuinely new renderings and new ideas that humans didn't have before. So I think some people will argue in that direction. I'm myself a bit conservative on that end, and I wouldn't expect that to happen. But that doesn't mean that it's useless, not at all. I think being able to access the existing renderings reliably, that would already be a great achievement. So in that regard, yeah, I think for terms like this, it also taps a bit the problem that we discussed earlier today, where we have For example, the Nyuktian Sanskrit and the Shleshas as well, where single term, single or like the same phrase when looked at it from different angles, and maybe even the intention of the author was to have it represent multiple meanings that can be read in different ways. And I think some authors were probably very good at playing those kind of games. And that really pushes what we can do with the technology to its limits at the moment. And yeah, but maybe there can be a future where we can add more secondary literature. And I think in the case like the one you presented today, being able to reflect the scholarly discussion behind that. So instead of just giving one rendering and saying, okay, Svalakshana here is this rendering, I think being able to say, okay, this is actually something that has been discussed in the following articles would be a great extension of Dharmamitra. And I hope that we can move things in that direction in the future. It is really more difficult to do properly than, I mean, the idea is nice, but then to make it properly work in a way that it really helps researchers and translators is more difficult. But yeah, I think my biggest hope for a platform like this would be to really make the current consensus of scholarship, of translators, of people who work with the material intensely, accessible in a convenient way. Yeah. So yeah, my hopes for it to make smart, genuine renderings, maybe not that huge. Yeah, but it might happen. I mean, that can certainly be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a rumor that someone was proposing to translate Tsongkhapa Sumbum using AI. I don't know what app or whatever program they were planning on using, but and then just having human beings kind of check up on it afterwards. But to me, like this Rangitsiniki Drupa, Rangitsiniki Matrupa, this kind of illustrates the problem with doing that because on the one hand, the Tibetans created an artificial language when they were learning to translate works from Chinese and Sanskrit. But we can't really do that with English, I don't think, or at least the results would not be very intelligible to educated people. So I'm very curious as to whether AI has gotten to the point where it's able to produce translations that are at all reliable. And when you're dealing with philosophical or poetic sort of material, with straightforward narrative, maybe it's good enough to get us a good first draft to work with. But when you're dealing with philosophical texts, and I mean, with Chandrakirti, the longer I look at him, the less I understand because it seems like he's using language in such a sophisticated and nuanced way that without really knowing the entire body of his work and the philosophical ideas underlying it, then you can come up with all kinds of radically divergent, even contradictory interpretations of a particular passage.
Yeah, I very much agree, and I'm myself more on the side of let's take it slow with the technology and have the human at every step to really make the right calls, because I think, especially, I think the material you are talking about is a very good example of that. But I would also think if we take a text like the Abhidhamma Kosha Bhashya, for example, which I think maybe has been rendered multiple times into English now, not really directly from the Sanskrit, which is a pity, but I think there may be like specific studies who do that for certain sections. But this text, I think, is still not translated well into English. Yeah, so the renderings we have are probably struggling to get the point in a lot of cases. And this is for things where people have put in considerable amount of time to understand it. So, yeah, I think in that sense, I'm very skeptical of saying, okay, we can push the button and then we get the entire English rendering or something out. I mean, technically it's possible, of course. You can translate the entire Kangyu this evening and we could have a version of that tomorrow. I'm not sure what this would help. And in that sense, that's also why we don't provide, let's say, the English kanji on dharmamitra.org. Yeah, that's not our goal. And in a way, the interface always requires you to make the effort yourself to put something in and to click the button. And then you can also see if the result is helping you or not. So yeah, but I think obviously very, very difficult problems cannot be shortcut with AI at all, I think. And the philological problems we have, the translation problems we have, they just compound. And if we then put an AI layer on top, then basically the English removes us further from understanding it than to really get to where we need to be. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you for this. I think it's a very good reminder of being aware of how difficult the task is actually that we are dealing with. So AI makes it look very easy to come to a first English understanding, and it's in a lot of cases super helpful, at least for me. I'm reading Tibetan very, very slowly, so when I can use a tool like MITRA, then of course I get to some rough idea of what the passage is about. But then once we start to drill into specific terms, then it basically can fall apart very, very quickly. And then we are really back to understanding ourselves, which can be very, 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 very demanding.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. And again, I think this machine is fantastic. It's wonderful. I use it virtually every day. But when you have to drill down into specific senses of specific terminology, then it's just coming up against the limitations of our understanding of these terms and these ideas that Buddhists produced over the course of 2000 whatever 100 years.
Yeah, and I think Kurt made this wonderful simile in the beginning of Dharmamitra when we were in the first year of the project, where he said, okay, maybe we shouldn't call it a translator, but just a dictionary plus plus. And I think that's a good way to think about it, because it's in a way, it's an extension of a chain of tools that has been developing for people working on Buddhist text over generations. Yeah, so there were times where only physical dictionaries were available. Then they have been digitized at some point, and the digitized versions became searchable, and then the searchable versions became accumulated, and then suddenly you have the machine translation system, which is basically another evolution of that. So I think that's a good way to think about this technology, because you don't expect the dictionary to do the thinking part for you. Yeah, so that's like the expectation wouldn't be made, but since these AI tools are so fluent and so quick, they kind of give the impression that they can also do the actual thinking part, which I think is the dangerous conclusion. Yeah.
Final note from my side anyway, I put a little thing on my academia.edu page about how Claude hallucinated some Sanskrit for me. And I was looking for a passage I was working from a Tibetan translation, and I was looking for Sanskrit underlying it. And Claude produced this Sanskrit that it said was specific citations from specific texts. And it asserted this with complete confidence. But then when I looked for them, I found out, oh no, actually, those passages don't exist in those texts. And when I challenged Claude on this, it admitted to having essentially fabricated these passages of Sanskrit out of nothing. And that really was an eye-opener for me personally. I wasn't familiar with the hallucinatory aspect of AI up to that point. So I guess we're still going to need human beings to do a few things for the foreseeable future.
Yes, absolutely. And on Dharmamitra, we are employing some technological checks that the system will only output things that is actually verified in our database. It is rarely happening, and that means it's not completely unseen, that it might output a reference that doesn't exist. This happened once recently because our database was not accessible for a while, so there was like a bug in the code. the system couldn't fetch the reference, so it was reproducing a reference that didn't exist, and that is of course not great. Under normal certain circumstances, this should not happen. So we really try to provide the link for everything. Yeah, but I think these machines are crazy in a way, because I had the same experience at some point, and then once you spot it and you are like, because I use AI a lot for programming. Obviously, it's great for programming because it saves so much time. But then sometimes I'm wondering, because the system is done with the work very, very quickly and the output makes no sense. So I'm asking, well, did you actually build this database? And it says, no, I didn't. But you now, as you say it, I should have done that. And it's like, in a way, it's very similar to, can you give me the Sanskrit reference? But then it just like totally makes it up. And when you call it out, it's like, oh yes, I'm sorry, I totally made it up. But this is like
Exactly.
no human would even think about acting that way. It's totally
Yeah.
out of mind. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you very much, and
Thank
also
you.
your feedback has been great for us. It's always great to get yeah, to hear about how we can improve the system. So also thank you for that. Yeah.
So does anyone have questions or comments to the terminological or philosophical parts? Yes, Patrick Lambelet, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is really just a comment kind of about some of the issues that John raised here. And I think that, I mean, there's a tendency for those of us who, you know, if we're teaching to undergraduates, especially now, and people who are very, you know, who are dealing with AI and kind of assuming that this is going to be that the answers that they're getting from AI, and I'm not just talking about with Dharmamitra, I think that here we're dealing with, you know, I think most of us who are using it at this level are people who are already quite trained in languages, and we go into it with a pretty good understanding of what the risks are, and we can spot the mistakes. And I think that this is the big challenge if you're involved in education, is making that clear to people who are just sort of jumping in and like, oh, okay, I put this into this search engine or into this, you know, into an AI tool, and assuming that the answer that it gives us is correct and accurate. And I think that this is, I mean, I don't really have any, this is not really a question, but just sort of, you know, an additional perspective on the challenges that we have in educating people to be really careful, right? That this is just a tool, that these are extremely sophisticated research tools, but they are not, you know, we can't just assume that they are the be all and end all. And I think that's a huge challenge for all of us who are kind of in education right now.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. I mean, this is sort of back when I was teaching undergraduates, I get term papers with chunks of Wikipedia stuck into them. And I mean, this dates me obviously, but now, and then the fabricated online available term papers came in available. But now I can't imagine what it's like trying to get undergraduates to read books. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. Divya Kumar Dumas, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. This was actually, I really, really enjoyed this presentation. I heard about this at the Schoenberg Rare Books conference a little while ago at Penn. And I have various thoughts and comments, but I wanted to sort of continue on this little AI issue that we're talking about in terms of teaching, because it strikes me that it's actually also an opportunity. Because, you know, when we teach critically to students who believe that what they're getting is in fact the truth, then in some way they're more able to believe that what they get is the truth. And there's this kind of opportunity here to teach students in a way where they have to realize that what is out there may not be the truth, but is always an interpretation. And I think that there's something very I don't know, positive about this context that you're creating here, where what you said about the dictionary thing, for example, where we have to define our terms right at the beginning, which is that no, none of us are purveyors of the truth. We are all purveying interpretation. And so I think this is actually potentially a really excellent movement in the humanities. So I wanted to put that out there because I know it's very scary, and students are doing absurd things. But thinking about Wikipedia, for example, nowadays, if you think about like Wikipedia education, sometimes it's an opportunity to learn things that you wouldn't otherwise have access to had you not. It depends. It depends on the site. I work on sites. I'm an archaeologist, but it depends. But it is there also, that opportunity. So I wonder if anyone really, I wonder if Sebastian, if you would be willing to respond to sort of that perspective.
Yeah, I think first of all, coming at this from the side of somebody who's building the tools and who's not really, I mean, I'm not an educator at the moment, so I have not a good idea of what is going on in the classrooms, but I can say that when building a tool like Dharmamitra, what is constantly on my mind is how can we make sure that all the search results that should be there are actually there, for example. So this is what drives me, is like make sure that the answers that we are providing are something that an experienced scholar, an experienced translator or researcher would expect to see. And now let's assume we do a good job of that. So we have 90% coverage or however we think about that. So we are doing something where like a lot of scholars will say, okay, good job, well done. Hypothetically speaking, what then happens is that the new generation who comes into the world of research, who has this tool then available, will come to a conclusion that was never intended. And that is to say, the results that I'm getting is all that there is. And there's nothing beyond that. And I think this is for somebody who's growing up without the tools would be a something like a counterintuitive conclusion. Yeah, we can say if somebody who didn't grow up with the tool, but who is used to go to the library themselves, who's used to search in databases themselves, they know BDRC, they know Gretel, they have all of these tools, they mastered them manually, so to speak. And then they see, okay, Dharmamitra gives me 90% of those results and I only need to press one button. Great, my life is much easier now. But they are aware that the 10% are missing, while the new generation that is coming into the world needs to learn that awareness in a very contrarian setting, I think, because they have basically only those tools in front of them. And I think in a way, and I hope I'm getting the path back to your argument, because I think it's a bit similar to how we had this brief period. I think one can look at it in a way like people in the, let's say, pre-photograph area were used to looking at paintings, and paintings are always an interpretation. They always have an intention. You can see it. It's obviously a representation of the world that is not real in quotation marks because there's somebody who commissions the painting and so on. So there's always some distortion already happening. So people in that age were used to interpret what they are looking at. Then the photograph came and you had the, in quotation marks, realistic representation of the outer world, which was a period of, I don't know, 150 or 200 years. And then we have the AI technology, which can produce a realistic photograph that is totally convincing, but totally fake. Yeah, so this is now what we have. So basically, again, we are moving away from the reality in that sense, and we are always confronted with interpretations. And I think that is also what is happening for philology in that sense. And maybe the whole idea that we can create the one ur-text of the Sanskrit text or of the Tibetan text that has been driving Buddhist studies since, I don't know, Bonhoeffer started the thing in 1840 something. This might also be a period where we look back at some point and say, well, that was a bit naive, maybe. So I don't know. Maybe that's a way to look at it, but I'm not sure. Yeah, that's just what comes to my mind. Yeah.
Okay, Marcus Perman, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you all so much. And thank you to Sebastian and Sarah for organizing this. And it's impressive. It's impressive also how magnanimous you all are in responding to all these questions. Well done. Well done. I just wanted to jump in and clarify, just to stamp out any false news. Someone mentioned that Tsongkhapa's collected works will be translated using AI, and the implication was that it would be a kind of press the button and get it all done. Fear not, that project is being led by Thupten Jinpa and Donald Lopez personally. They will be reading all of that personally, every word from the Tibetan, and each volume will be assigned to professional scholars and translators, and teams of people will be working on it. AI will be used to speed up some of the processes, and they'll be experimenting with it in order to figure out how to do this 26 or 28 volumes, whatever it is, in a more reasonable time period, but they will not be using it naively. So fear not. I think it's going to be an amazing project. And I think we can trust Jimpa and Donald Lopez. If you know about them or how they work, don't worry, Thupten Jinpa won't let anything be published until he has verified what he thinks it means anyway. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Glad to hear it. In fact, that was just a rumor that I got from a friend, and I had no source for it. So I don't want to be a purveyor of fake news. And if someone is able to translate that entire collected works accurately, wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions or thoughts? Then maybe we can move on to our last presenter. Philippe Mas, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Wonderful.
Ah, great. Then
Okay,
please.
yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Sarah, thank you very much. Sebastian, I'm happy to share a little bit of my research, which deals with the Patanjali Yoga Shastra. It's not a Buddhist text, but coming from a Brahmanical perspective, but very much influenced by Buddhism. And before I go into it, I would like to say that I'm, like John, actually mind blown by what you are doing. It's absolutely amazing. That's the only word that I can find. And I'm especially impressed by the speed of the improvement of your tools. So things that annoyed me a couple of weeks ago are not there anymore. So it's moving forward very fast. And I think that even you are quite conservative with the perspective that you provide, that you can even, I think that you probably exceed what you announce here publicly. So you can be optimistic. And I'm telling you this because I'm presenting here a difficult case from my philological work on a text which is not actually well established in its printed versions that we find. You said earlier that it's important for scholars to go back from e-text to the printed edition to actually check the source. But I think especially for Sanskrit, it's important to see that a similar transformation has happened earlier, namely the movement away from manuscripts to printed editions. The printed editions have actually made manuscript studies more or less obsolete, and scholars usually believe that what they have in front of them in printed editions is the text as it was created, sometimes hundreds or thousands years earlier, and we usually forget about the history of the transmission and the circumstances in which these printed editions were produced, because they were produced by people who wanted to achieve results quickly at the beginning of the 20th century, to make a lot of material available on the basis of accessible manuscripts, mostly written on paper manuscripts in Devanagari script. Nobody actually had the possibility to go to various libraries to manuscript libraries to compare different text versions. So all this is work that still needs to be done. So yeah, the case that I wanted to present here is about the working of karma, theory of karma and rebirth, and the role of vasanas, of latent impressions, the relationship between memories and samskaras, also impressions. And the text that I'm working on is quite obscure in this particular passage. For example, it does not actually have or specify what the sutra is talking about when we have this genitive plural jati desha kala vyavahitanam api. So what are the things that are separated by birth, by location, and by time? And in my translation, I wanted to leave this open. Dharmamitra, on the other hand, then supplies a subject, and namely the latent impressions that we find here in the translation. There is an uninterrupted sequence of latent impressions. So, yeah, so anantaryam is the uninterrupted sequence, and the genitive is jati desha kala vyavahitanam, vyavahita, adjective or verbal participle, without a specific referent. So this is open to interpretation, and Dharmamitra is narrowing this down by supplying a subject which is not actually there, which I find a little bit problematic. Then, yeah, there are other problems. First of all, I believe that the text as it is appears in the printed edition with Svavyanjaka Anjana at the position where there is this star here doesn't make much sense. Yeah, Svavyanjaka Anjana is the manifestation caused by its manifesting cause. And here we have a construction, so it in the sentence that if the manifesting cause would arise, then something would manifest vyajeta. And I think that this vyajeta takes up the anjana here in this definition of what the arising of a certain maturation as a cat actually is. So, but when I feed this into Dharmamitra, without this emendation, Dharmamitra nevertheless comes up with a translation. And this is something which I would wish Dharmamitra to have, to indicate when Dharmamitra has problems.
Yeah.
It says, okay, so that actually is syntactically difficult, or it's difficult from the perspective of meaning. I don't know actually what to do with it. And similar in the later part of the sentence where we have a absolutive here and a finite verb, an absolutive without an accusative object, upadaya vyajyeta. And Dharmamitra takes vasana here to be the subject of this sentence. So actually, from the perspective of Asandi, that's not possible. Vasana needs to be nominative or accusative plural feminine in order not to enter into vowel sandhi. Otherwise, we would have vasano upadaya if vasana would be the subject of the sentence, and then we wouldn't have an accusative object for the absolutive. And yeah, so and if vasana is plural, then it cannot be the subject to the final verb vyajyeta, which is occurs in the singular. So there are numerous problems that I have here. And what I actually would like to be able to is to enter into a dialogue with Dharmamitra. To give Dharmamitra a live feedback saying, look, thank you very much. It's very useful. And I think Dharmamitra is always very useful, even if the result is not immediately usable. it's another version, like another printed translation by a predecessor, which also frequently do not make much sense. So that helps me to reflect to develop my own thoughts about this. But yeah, telling Dharmamitra, look, why do you take this to be the subject? Why don't we have a accusative object here? And why do you supply here a subject for this sutra where there is none? Wouldn't it be better to leave the sutra as vague as it is, to open up more interpretations? So these are the kinds of problems that I was facing, and yeah, you have answered this already earlier. Some of this, and I see this, but still, yeah, I think the one thing that I would really want to be able to is this exchange with Dharmamitra, live exchange.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think, in a way, I also think it's very sobering to see the mistakes that MITRA makes. I think that's also important to be aware of that. I think at the same time, it's also, I think you made the point as well that a lot of the human created translations are not very good either. And that also extends to the critical editions, of course. If somebody is not able to edit the text properly, then usually the translation is also not usable. That happens often. Yeah, I think there's a technical reason, and maybe it's a bit of our approach so far why we don't have the dialogue capability yet. So the example that John gave previously, where he was asking Claude for some Sanskrit reference, and then it totally made it up, and then only after calling it out, it was like pedaling it back and then saying, okay, I totally made this up. So our approach to avoiding that Dharmamitra does something like that so far is that we really limit what you can do with the interface. So we don't have the open dialogue capability the way that Claude and other systems have it, because I was very scared of people starting to use Dharmamitra for asking all kinds of questions. And then obviously what we can verify with our database and what we can reference in e-text and so on to make sure that that is always lined up with what people would throw at a system like that is really challenging. But then I think we are making improvements with the technology, and one upgrade that we are working on will be user accounts, which then make it possible to have like individual translation histories where you can have certain strands that you have been working on. And in that context, we also want to add a dialogue capability that you can make suggestions, because I think it would be one of the best ways to get feedback back to Dharmamitra, that we can also use that data in order to improve the system, which I think would be really important. So that's a direction we want to take, but how we can make it really work out technologically that we avoid hallucination is a bit challenging. Yeah, but I can see how valuable it would be, and it's also would be a great way to make Dharmamitra adapt more to your specific style and your specific way you would like to work with the text, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thanks again for the great work we're doing. That was definitely not meant as a fundamental critique. No? It's just wanted to highlight some limitations that I saw. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think yeah, and also we are occasionally updating the translation data and so on. So you will also see that the quality of translation is changing over time. So that's in general too, I think, especially for Dharmamitra, if we compare to the version that we had, I don't know, 2 years ago when we launched, the Sanskrit was still very rough, and I don't know if it was, I mean, compared to what we can do nowadays, I think it was barely usable at all. And in that way, I think also nowadays to 1 year ago, it has also changed there. So
absolutely. And many times I tried Dharmamitra on the Patanjali Yoga Shastra. The results of Dharmamitra were much better than what I find in the translation of earlier scholars. So
great.
congratulations on this. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, thank you everyone who submitted and presented the case studies. I think each one was fascinating in its own way. And I think we still have a little time, so if there is anyone who happens to have a specific example or case they would like to discuss, please speak up and we will make some time to take a look at it together. Okay, we have someone, Sarah Taub. Please, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, it's just a simple question, and I'm sorry if you already answered it, but does Dharmamitra give alternate possible grammatical analyses? And, you know, it might be interesting if it does, it could perhaps weight them with how likely it finds them.
Just so I got the question right, you were asking about grammatical analysis.
Right, you know,
Yeah.
like, oh, this could be, you know, this could be the subject, that could be the object, but it could be a different way.
I think currently Dharmamitra is organized to go for one most plausible solution. And yeah, I think it came up a few times before today that this is not always ideal, and especially for Sanskrit, but also for Tibetan verses, for example, it really, there are so many ways how it can be interpreted. Yeah, I think it would be a different design decision to allow for that. I do think we have to go that direction at some point in order to really cover and to be really like appropriate for the material that people want to use Dharmamitra for. We should be able to do that at some point. But currently, yeah, I think it would be way down the line to do that, maybe in a couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just like there's some easy earlier phase where it's considering different ones and could, you know, bring that forth easily. It's not designed that way. Okay, thank you so very much. This is just absolutely amazing, just like everyone else here has said. Very, very appreciative.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question from Andrew, please.
Yeah, I just put a screenshot in the chat. And this is just a minor thing. I've been using Dharmamitra almost recently, almost exclusively to basically help learn Buddhist hybrid Chinese. So I'm building up vocabulary, you know, flashcards and stuff. So I'm going through a certain text and doing quite a bit of searching just on terms. I'm not trying to translate texts. And this particular Chinese term popped up, and when I searched for it by itself, it gave an error. But when it occurs as part of I think it's usually a 4-character compound, then Dharmamitra could find it and translate it, and it was aware of it. But for some reason, by itself, it didn't recognize it. And the other 2 characters in that 4-character compound, it was able to identify by just the 2 characters. So I don't know why, and it's maybe not super important, but there was a little bug or error with this particular term.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting this. I think there are probably 2 reasons for this. So the one part is that for Chinese, the number of characters, I mean, the possibilities increase exponentially with the shorter the request becomes, and this is like, I think, very intuitive, but for Chinese is especially extreme. The difference between 4 characters and 2 characters is basically you can have so many possibilities on 2 characters that the search system very quickly becomes overloaded with that. So this is a real problem. So this is, I think, one part, that it just becomes a bit unreliable if you go for single or 2-character queries. The more substantial content you can give it, the more it can actually do something reasonable with that. So that is the one part. And the other part, and this might be at play here, is that we do try to nudge Dharmamitra a bit to stay on the topic of classical language, and ideally, I mean, Buddhism is not necessarily a gate, I think, because obviously we have a lot of Sanskrit literature that is not Buddhism, the same for Chinese, for Tibetan as well. That should be possible to work in Dharmamitra. So maybe we have to fine-tune this a little bit so that we don't gate too much. And I think in the case that you showed the screenshot, this request should not be gated. So let's see that we improve this, yeah.
Okay, anyone else? This is still a good opportunity to raise any questions or comments that haven't come up yet, but you might be thinking about. Jigme, please go ahead.
Thank you for this presentation. It's really interesting. I'm wondering if Philip Mass ran the text through the translate function on Dharmamitra, because I think he ran it through the research function, which wouldn't have given him an actual translation. Am I wrong in that, or am I missing something?
I used the research function of Dharmamitra for this translation that I showed. Yeah.
But if it wasn't put through the translate function, then the program wouldn't have had a chance to translate, right?
The Dharmamitra research function also provides a translation. So that is given at the beginning of the response. So when people use the research function, they will get a translation as well, yeah.
And it's an actual original translation for that particular piece, not something it's pulling from the database.
Exactly. So there's a bit of a technical difference. So when you use the normal translation function, then it's basically just trying to do a good job on that passage. So it will try its best to make a faithful rendering of that passage into English. But if you use the research function, then it will first assemble all the possible references from the database and only then start to translate. So this is why it's slower. So if you use the research function, you don't get the translation immediately. You have to wait a couple of seconds because it will start to crawl to the database. But I think on average, the quality of the translation will be a bit higher because it has all those contextual knowledge that it doesn't have in the normal translation mode. So usually it will lead to better outcomes. And this is maybe why Philip has decided to use that. I'm not sure, but
it might be interesting to put the passage through the just translate function to see if it was, to see what the difference would be. Anyway, thank you so much.
I think you're making a good point, and this is something that a couple of our users, I think Jacob Thornton made the point at some point that he really enjoys the fact that the different functions provide different translations, because it can sometimes really be nice when struggling with a passage, when working through something, that you have the normal translation mode and the deep research mode, and you can look at the output side by side, and that can maybe also help to understand better what is going on. Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I think if there is nothing else, Sebastian, maybe could you please share a few closing thoughts with us?
Thank you all very much for coming to this workshop, and I think it's very humbling and amazing to see so many people showing up. I didn't expect that, to be very honest, and it's also really showing that our work is being actually of practical value. And I think there are lots of digital humanities projects which don't really have the same amount, or which don't really see adaptation ever. And in that sense, I'm just so happy about seeing that people find this actually useful and that they can make something productive out of this. So yeah, this is great. And the feedback we are getting on days like today, it's just fantastic, because that really makes it possible for us to improve the system. And we try our best to listen and to see that we can make one step at a time to turn this platform into something that is more useful. Yeah. So yeah, thank you all very much for coming and for giving us all the great feedback. Yeah. Yeah, I think we will probably do this again. So we have already discussed this, that there will be a workshop in 2027. So maybe in the beginning of the year, in the spring period, the date we have to see, but I think we will do another follow-up of this, and it might become a yearly thing to have this opportunity to discuss together about the platform. Yeah. And you can, of course, always send us an email. There was unfortunately a small typo in the announcement of the workshop. So the email address was given with dharmamitra-project, but it's actually dharmamitra.project@gmail.com. So sorry for this. Yeah, but you can always send us an email if you have questions, if there are problems with the system. Please let us know, and we will take that into account. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Sebastian, could you share with us how the records will be available for the participants?
Oh yeah, this is also good. So we have recorded the session today, and of course, if anybody who is on the call who has been speaking, if you feel uncomfortable with the recording being online, then please reach out to us. We can cut the recording and make sure that only the things, only the people who want to be part of the recording are also accessible. Yeah, it will certainly be available on the Tsadra Foundation YouTube channel, I think, and we will also make it available on the Dharmamitra YouTube channel. So yeah, it will be available in the coming weeks at some point. Yeah. Yeah, this is also a good point in the chat. I think Eventbrite hasn't been the greatest platform. We have also understood this, and I think next time we will try to do this in a more simple way by just providing a Google form that you don't need to sign up for. So sorry for this, but we will change the login format the next time. Yeah. Okay. I don't know, Markus, do you have something at the
Oh,
end?
thank you so much. It's
Okay.
wonderful, really amazing work. Thank you all so much. It's really exciting, and I
Yeah.
look forward to seeing all the continued developments.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think maybe we will probably send an email out over the Tsadra mailing list when the recordings are online, I think. Yeah.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we will also put it on Facebook once it's online, so you can share it with anybody who's interested. Yeah.
Hey,
Perfect.
Sebastian?
Oh, yeah.
Sebastian?
Yeah, we hear you, Kurt. Yeah.
Could I just say a couple words? I just
Please.
catching the very end here, but I just
You are
hope everyone realizes what an extraordinary effort this has been, pretty much single-handedly through Sebastian, with just a little bit of help from others. It shows an extraordinary amount of command of languages, computing skills, data, and also a good intuition about user interface. So I'm honestly amazed.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I mean, yeah, you have been the person who made all of this possible anyway. So
I'm the person helped you who make all this possible. Let's be clear about that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, then yeah, thank you everybody, and I think it's been a great session, and thank you for all who contributed, and I think we can call it a day at this point. Yeah.